go ahead and call this meeting to order. This is the General Government Appropriations Subcommittee of the House Appropriations Committee, and appreciate everybody coming today. I heard the speaker say on Thursday that he was going to spend part of the weekend trying to come up with a way to get everybody in their seats at 10 o'clock on over in the chamber, so I'm going to talk to him and see what he came up with. Maybe it'll help us get members of the subcommittee in by the starting time of the meetings. But I appreciate those of you who are here. I appreciate our budget analysts for being here, and members out here, persons from the agencies who've come to present to us today. Thank you very much for being here. And we're starting off with the Office of the Governor, and OPB I know is here if you want to come on up. And if you would go to the I don't know. You want to just go with this one over here? If I can turn it on. See if that's on there. Yeah, it is.
Right.
And if you would tell us, I know now because I've been told, but if you would tell the members of the subcommittee what page of the tracking document that you're referring to.
Sure. What I've got is page 16 of 40 of the tracking document.
Right.
Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today and present to the subcommittee. I'm going to hit on a few highlights for the Office of the Governor's budget, and also, so for your knowledge, we have members from attached agencies here also to answer any specific questions about any of the attached agencies, including Office of Consumer Affairs, GEMA, I believe Office of the Child Advocate, and a few others. The highlights I want to hit on is when I spoke to you last on the amended fiscal year 2007, I spoke about the Governor's Emergency Fund. And for the amended fiscal year 2008, it was a total of $4 million, two parts. One was the $1.2 million, where we started the year in the hole as it relates to the tornadoes and fires, and there was another $2.8 million as well that were projections of needs for emergency drought funding. That same 2.8 you're going to see also in the fiscal year 2009 budget request for the Office of the Governor and the emergency funds. The 2.8 is a projection to pay for approximately 10 communities as well, interconnectivity, new wells, and water. The specifics of that projection I'm happy to pass over to GEMA if you have questions on that. So that's $2.8 million in the fiscal year 2009. Also in the Governor's office, you're going to see a request for a transfer of a position from the Children Youth Coordinating Council to handle grants administration. That position is being proposed to be moved to the Office of Planning and Budget as part of the Governor's proposal to consolidate the Children Youth Coordinating Council and the Children's Trust Fund under a new Office of Children and Family. That's a $53,000 position. That is also on the tracking document on page 16, kind of in the middle of the page. The other item that I'd like to point out is in the Office of Student Achievement, and that's a $500,000 item. It's a proposal from the Governor to start an auditing division or auditing function as it relates to the QBE funding formula. It's come to his attention that there's some inappropriate classification of students across the state for QBE formula purposes. Because of constraints on where we can propose funding, we put the $500,000 in the Office of Student Achievement, but we're certainly open to the conversation and the very appropriate conversation about where that money should go as far as, I'm sorry, I see. Let me see if I can point out the right page for you. It is on page 18, line 25.12.2. And we certainly agree that there's probably a more appropriate placement of that auditing function, probably in a place where they have a core function of auditing. But the Governor did want to make the proposal that we need to actually do some auditing around QBE and the classification of students to make sure that we're spending our education dollars appropriately. But those are the three highlights that I wanted to point out as it relates to the Office of the Governor. There are some requests as it relates to the Office of Consumer Affairs and the customer service, and we have Joe Doyle and Bill Cladd here to speak to those as well. And also, if you have any specific questions around the 2.8 for Governor's Emergency Fund and the projection around that, we have representatives from GEMA here as well. And I would open it up for any questions.
Thank you. We have any questions from members of the subcommittee? Chairman Hill.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. And mine would be, going back to page 16, the first question I guess we'd have is on 2545. And was wondering, was there a specific grant involved in that request for an additional $25,000? It sounds like a specific amount for something.
What this is if we took a look at the history of the grant funding for the Humanities Council, and for many years they were at a higher grant level. This is not for a specific grant, but just to get their grant funding to about $175,000. I can get you a copy of this history of that grant funding, but up until about 2003, they were in that range of $175,000. And for the past 4 or 5 years, well, since 2004, they had been reduced down to the $150,000 level. So that $25,000 was just to give them the opportunity for more grant opportunities.
I would appreciate that because, and also earlier on the Council for the Arts, we seemed to be moving money from the art grants to personnel services, and also if we could get the details on that, what people were putting where, or what specific grants might be impacted by this, and what the new people might be doing. I'm just trying to figure out what this is all about.
Okay. I'll tell you what I do know, but happy to get more details to you. I know that Susan Weiner has some administrative needs and is just moving some internal funds, or proposing to move some internal funds there to handle those administrative needs, but we'll follow up with specific details if you'd like.
Okay, and when she does an excellent job, I was just wondering what grants might be impacted by that in a negative way. And in 25.5 on the next page, on 17, the $70,000 for the child welfare assessment, what is that going to include that we don't do through DHR? It sounds, are we duplicating a function here, or is this an additional function?
As a part of Tom Rawlings, he started in this position and was appointed recently. He saw that there was a need to take a fresh look at some of the efforts. As you know, the Office of Child Advocate's job is to kind of be an independent monitor of the efforts at the Child Welfare Office, and so this was part of his initial efforts in his new role as the office as the Child Advocate.
Okay, and I know it's kind of picky with us looking at that, but with the revenue starting to drop, we're going to,
sure,
of course, be looking at everything and seeing how it's going to impact the budget overall.
And I believe we have a representative from the Office of Child Advocate, Tammy Walker, is that right, who would be able to speak in more specifics for that assessment.
We'll ask her to come up.
It's your pleasure, Mr. Chairman. That'll be all.
Did that answer your question, Chairman Hill?
Yes, it does.
Questions? Any other questions from the subcommittee? I wanted to ask on the governor's emergency funds on that $2.8 million. You said it was for the funding was being requested for 10 wells. Is that right?
Oh, I'm sorry. And I was trying to give you just a general idea of how GEMA based their projection, and their projection was based on if we had the need for the top 10 communities, and the types of uses would be for interconnectivity, new wells, and water associated with those 10 communities. But again, it is just a projection, so that's how the projection was based, and I'm sure they'd be happy to speak some more detail on that.
What do you mean interconnectivity? What do you mean by that? Interconnectivity? What interconnectivity of water supplies, or?
I'm assuming so. Yeah.
Yes, sir. It would be interconnectivity of water supplies. Some water systems would have to actually lay pipe to another water supply to keep their reservoirs filled.
Okay. I might ask you to come up in a moment. Any other questions from the, we had questions about the Office of the Child Advocate. Now, there's some legislation moving related to that, is there not?
For the consolidation?
Right.
Yes, sir.
Do you know what the status of that is?
I do not,
Okay.
but I will follow up.
And what's the total on that? The office, under the Office of Child Advocate, what's the total addition of funds?
There's actually a savings. There's a transfer
Saving,
of a position from the Children and Youth Coordinating Council to the Office of Planning and Budget to handle the administrative needs, since this new office would be consolidated and administratively attached to the OPB. But also, you'll also notice under the Office of the Child Advocate a savings that's noted of $51,000, and that's on line 17, 25.5.4.
Okay. Again, on the governor's emergency funds. Now, what with the addition, well, even without the addition, this $2.8 million, as it stands right now, what is the total in his emergency funds?
Right now, we traditionally start out $3.4 million. We started the year, though, as I alluded to in the amended fiscal year 2008, with $1.2 million, kind of in the hole based on the tornadoes and fires. So I guess it'd be 3.4 minus 1.28. Now, for the fiscal year 2009, we'd of course start with what's in the base, and that's the 3.4.
Okay. Okay, I don't see any other questions. Thank you, I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
We're going to ask some of the attached agencies to come up.
All right.
Thank you
Thanks,
very
sir.
much. To the gentleman back here, if you would come up and identify yourself, I want to ask you, I have a question, maybe others have questions about the...
I'm Hugh Warren, Director of Finance at GEMA, and
Okay.
Mr. English would like to have been here, but he's had another meeting that conflicted.
I was asking about the wells and the interconnectivity, and you were speaking on that. If you could speak further on that,
Yes,
I
sir.
appreciate it.
We during planning for the drought, there have been communities identified that we thought were at risk. As time went on, we developed a model basically that would estimate a minimal federal declaration and what it would take to do that. The way that model was done is we got costs for drilling wells. We decided, okay, what if 5 communities needed additional wells drilled? Then we decided also that we needed to also look at communities that might need interconnectivity between water supplies, and we developed a cost for those, and that's how we came up with the $2.8 million. The 2.8 would be match for any federal declaration that we received under the drought. To begin with, we have not received a federal declaration as of this point. As time goes on, hopefully we'll get more rain and federal declaration will not be necessary. The 2.8 could be used for other drought issues also if we need it to.
Okay, I appreciate that. We have any other questions we do have a question. Chairman Royal.
Are you familiar with the city of Richland, Georgia, and their health issues with their water delivery system?
No, sir, not right off the top of my head.
It's not in my district, but Representative Bob Hanner, they have a very old water delivery system that has asbestos in their water lines.
Yes.
They have a high incidence of cancer, and they're trying to find some assistance in replacing those water lines.
There has been I'm not sure the exact word, but an executive committee that the governor has appointed, which has got Dr. Couch, Mr. English, the director of GFA, and the director of public health. The governor, I think's strategy is for this is to make sure we use all available resources that we already have. One of those available resources is GFA. GFA has loans and grants that they can make to communities for water supplies, but I'll be glad to go back and research the Richland issue for you.
I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Chairman Hill was next.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And
Go ahead.
thank you very much. I'm live now. I want to make sure I'm reading this right. And that on page 17, at your line 25.8.3, where the agency had requested $148,000 of state monies for a match for federal hazardous mitigation funds. As I read, we're losing a total of almost $600,000. Why did the department ask for that, and why is it no longer necessary, or is it desired? What were the funds going to be used for?
That money would have been used for match for our hazard mitigation program to ensure that we could continue to operate the hazard mitigation program at its current level. We've developed an indirect cost plan this past year, been able to generate some additional federal funding and free up some state funding. So we think we can make that match ourselves, and basically we're no longer of need of that at this point.
So that $600,000 you don't need anymore?
No, the 600 we'll need and we'll get because we've been able to find funding within the budget to make sure we can draw it down, sir.
Okay, and pretty much the same question on the top of the next page for the public assistance funds, where you had $121,000 for a total.
It was the same issue.
Okay, you're finding a lot of extra money in the budget. That's a total of about $270,000
Yes.
that you found. Well, great. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman Hill. Chairman Williams has a question.
In regards to the governor's emergency fund, the $2.8 million, would it not be appropriate maybe to put that under GEMA, since they deal with these disasters and emergencies? I know the governor's fund normally is for emergencies and that sort of thing, but never have we talked about natural disasters, drought, and so forth. Would it be better on a GEMA?
Sir, I think what the governor's intention is to fund all emergencies as far as state match needs are out of the governor's emergency fund, and we're open to doing it however the governor and the General Assembly see fit as far as how we get that match. A lot of the match that we draw goes to local communities for their state share and also other state agencies, so that money doesn't usually get spent. The majority of the money does not get spent by GEMA itself. That money gets transferred to other agencies, so to speak.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions from the members of the subcommittee? Do we have any questions? Okay. Thank you. I appreciate you coming.
Yes, sir.
I know we have some task agencies, other task agencies for the governor's office here. Do we have? I know we have the Department of Office of Consumer Affairs. There you are. You want to come up, sir? We know who you are, but when you come up to the mic, if you would tell us again who you are and what agency you're with, we would appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me here. My name is Joe Doyle. I'm with the Governor's Office of Consumer Affairs, and the Governor's Office of Customer Service is part of the Consumer Affairs Office.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you have anything to present to us?
I passed around a sheet. There are the request we have is for $1.35 million, and it's consistent with the proposal that we made 2 years ago for the Customer Service Improvement Program. So we're in line with the original program that we presented a couple of years ago. All of the funds this year are right on schedule to provide improved service to 1-800-GEORGIA. 1-800-GEORGIA is a new program, a new service that just became operational January 1st, and it's getting citizens to the right place on the first phone call. Historically, people called government and talked to 6 to 10 places before they found the person that could help them. We are talking people to people, and we're getting them to the right place with one phone call. In the first 6 weeks, we have a 94% approval rating from citizens. It's working very well. We know that the volume is going to increase over the next year, and we want to be able to maintain the same service level that we forecast for the initial period. So all of the funds in our request are to support the 1-800-GEORGIA service, providing an increased level of service to constituents. And it falls into 3 categories, really, in the sheet I gave you. There's $800,000 to merely fund the additional call volume. In year 1, we're projecting a call volume of 1.2 million calls, and in year 2, coming ahead, we're projecting a call volume of $1.8 million. So we're requesting $800,000 to fund that. We have an underlying knowledge base or encyclopedia that enables us to get citizens to the right place on their first phone call. If they call in and ask to know something about asbestos, for example, we will take them to the right government employee that can help them. We do this through a Google search on this knowledge base. So we're asking for $280,000 to maintain that knowledge base. And further, we're asking $270,000 to enhance that knowledge base so that we can make it available 24/7 on the Internet for citizens so they could have a self-serve way to get at this information. I don't know if you're aware, but Speaker Richardson asked us to handle the call volume for the House this session, and we are doing that through 1-800-GEORGIA as well, and the people in his office say that that's going extraordinarily well.
Thank you.
No, ma'am.
Thank you. We do have a couple of questions, if you
Certainly.
would care to take them. Chairman Royal, I believe, was first.
Are all these call centers operated by the state? They're not contracted out or anything, are they?
There are about 6 call centers that are contracted out. These funds are just for one call center. This is a call center that GTA used to operate. It was directory assistance, where people would call in, GTA would give them a phone number and hang up. We've remade that call center so that you call in, you will talk to a person, and then we will transfer you to the person that could help you. These funds are not for any other state call center. At this point,
Are all of the call centers located in the state of Georgia? Or
there are a few that are not, but there are none that are offshore.
Okay, that was where I was going.
I'd say about 80% of the state's call centers are in the state of Georgia.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Chairman Hill has a question.
I may follow up on Chairman Royal's question, and I would have to actually research this, but I thought about 4 years ago there was actually some legislation passed that we couldn't outsource even call centers outside of the state of Georgia if it was for a Georgia thing. And we'll have to look at that. We certainly can't do that right now, but I thought we passed that about 4 or 5 years ago.
I'm not familiar with that, but the ones that are out of the state are like DHR has a call center in Maryland that handles reservations for hotels. They do that for a lot of hotels. So there's some specialty call centers that do that sort of thing that work well, and those are under contracts that have been going on for quite a while.
Right. And like I said, I'm not criticizing anything one way or the other. It's just I'm trying to jog my memory, and perhaps if we can research and find that out prior to our next meeting, get that information back to the chairman, just to make sure that I'm not correct. Hopefully, I'm not correct, and there's not a.
I would very much like to know. I have not heard of that.
But the other question would be the combination of the $550,000 on the knowledge base to access it and also update it, and the $800,000 for the calls. That's about $1,350,000, and that's a pretty good amount because this will be taking away, I assume, some of the calls and stuff going into all the other agencies. Should we expect a decrease in costs from other agencies?
In time, and I cannot tell you right now where those costs will show up, but what you say is very logical. And as we go down the road and have data each year, we will see what calls we are handling and where they otherwise might have gone. So we will have information not only that shows where the volume is going, we will have information that shows up who is doing a good job, and it will have information that would enable us to further the conversation that you're mentioning. Right now, we don't have the data.
Okay, and I would be interested in finding out when this will be rolling into effect department by department, and then as soon as we could, I'd like to see a report back, even of monthly calls, how much is going to each department, because they will be coming back to us with those questions, and if we're taking 100 calls a week or something away from a department, well, I can see that they should be reducing some of their costs. So I'd certainly be interested in seeing some sort of regular reporting on the progress of this.
We do have that information. We will be gathering that information. So it's all part of where we agree this needs to be going.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Number 20, position number 26. Chairman Smith, is that you?
Thank you.
I think that was next.
Thank you, sir. And obviously this is a government service I think that's very much needed. But to give you an example of something that's happening in the suite of offices that I'm in at the Capitol, our office secretaries are getting a large volume of calls now from people seeking information from agency heads, and instead the calls are being directed to office secretaries. So I wonder if there's something like that going on. They and then are having to refer them to, for us, the Department of Natural Resources. So we have all of a sudden had the added responsibility of filtering general public phone calls that should be going to agencies, and instead they're coming to office secretaries. So I thought I would point that out to you.
No, that is a very good point, and that's exactly the type of service we want to provide, and we would like to market and tell the general public to call 1-800-GEORGIA. We would like to tell the secretarial and administrative people, if they have a question, direct them to us, and we will take care of getting them to the right place.
We're trying to figure out what's happening because it seems to have increased, and I don't know if these publications, the directories, the 411 information numbers are misdirecting these calls, but it really takes up a large, this is unusual. This is the first year that it's been such an overload. So somewhere with public information about Georgia department heads, it is being directed to House committees. So that's a real disconnect there.
We are changing the information in all the state's blue pages, and about half of the cities now show 1-800-GEORGIA. I don't know why the volume would be increasing. It should be going the other way.
Right.
If you would tell me who to get in touch with, I would like to get to the bottom of understanding it.
Well,
so that we
that's
can
music.
turn that
That's all I
around.
wanted to hear.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what we're trying to
Okay.
do.
All right,
So I
thank
really
you.
appreciate you telling me.
Okay. Well, our committee deals with water and all those types of things, but for some reason, we're being called instead of the agency. Thank you.
We are also tracking by zip code who's calling, and for the House, we're tracking what issue they're calling about. And we have that information to give back to you to say, here's who's calling, by what part of the state, and here's why they're calling.
That's great. I mean, I'm really happy to see that this is getting top attention.
I will leave you my cell phone.
Okay.
Please call me, and I will help solve that.
All right. Thank you very much.
Okay. He said call his cell phone, not the 1-800 number, by the way. Number 24, is that Chairman Mills?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a question. Under the Commission for New Georgia, we were presented some information a couple of years back which gave the tallied results of how many calls were coming in, how long people were being put on hold, how many went unanswered, et cetera, et cetera. And do you have a follow-up sheet to that now that we've invested?
We do, and I'm so proud of it. I went over it earlier with Representative Parsons and would love to with everyone here when it's convenient for you. When we started several years ago, it was only about 2.5 years ago. Time seems to seem like it was longer. But the average time on hold that citizens waited in the 26 call centers that we knew about at that time was 5 minutes. In the course of a year, you could expect to wait 5 minutes. There was one call center that had an average hold time of 56 minutes over a year's time. The behavior was not good at all. Today, working with those agencies and not spending any money at the agency level to hire people or do anything, the average time to handle a call has gone from 5 minutes to 1 minute and 30 seconds. So that's been cut 70% in the time that we've been working with them just by improving their management skills. And the abandonment rate has gone from 17% to 11%. Our goals are to have a speed to answer of 1 minute and an abandonment rate of 9%, which is consistent with industry standards. And with the work we're doing this year that is already funded, we believe quite strongly that we will be there this time next year. So there's been dramatic progress in call handling.
Sounds like it has, and that would be great information to have as we look at trying to justify our decisions on financial decisions in this budget to our constituency. And I just, out of curiosity, the one that was 50-something minutes, has it now been reduced? I was listening to your ratios. That would be down to about 10 minutes.
That was an outsourced call center, and they're no longer a vendor. So we took care of that.
Great, great. Well, thank you very much, and I look forward to that. That would be great information to have.
I will get back with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Chairman Calvin Hill has a question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And to follow up on Chairman Mills' question, and because we will be looking at many separate departments and agencies, and we really applaud this time coming down to a minute and a half from 5 minutes. That's a significant drop, and we applaud everybody involved. Do we have a breakdown, perhaps, on by agency or by department of where those drops are? Not the detail, but we'd like to see which ones actually have had those substantial
Yes, we do. We track each month what we call a key performance indicator for all the call centers. And, just by people, the old adage is people respect what you inspect. And just by paying attention and giving them new techniques and holding them accountable for it, these people don't work for me, but they are wanting to do their best. And we do have that information on a monthly basis as to where they started, where they are today, and that is available. I do not, don't take me wrong, I don't want to be finding fault and parading around the information about who's doing poorly still, because we'll fix that. But I am very proud of the people that have gone from bad performance to excellent performance.
And certainly, we're not asking you to find fault. We're just looking for facts, because we have to analyze that, and we provide your budgets. Yeah. So if you'd be so kind as to provide us a copy, and then, Mr. Chairman, I would be interested not only for a copy now, but as we continue throughout the year so we can monitor the progress. I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
That's all the question. I did want to ask you about, Chairman Williams brought this to my attention, in your, if I'm reading this correctly, in your agency request to the governor's office, when you were going through your request for the 09 budget, it looks like you made requests for some additions and doing away with some positions, if I'm reading this correctly, that the governor is not in the governor's recommendations. Is that right? Everything
that we are requesting at this moment is part of the governor's recommendation. So I apologize for any inconsistency.
Well, I mean, I'm probably reading this incorrectly, but on page 17, line 25.7.8, in agency requests, reduce funds and decrease investigations by one position, reduction of $75,000, and then in the governor's recommendation, that's just a zero. And then there's an addition to add funds for one position, increase internal IT support, $50,000. That's a zero in his recommendation.
That's in the Office of Consumer Affairs. Yes, we are just moving the money around. We're not asking for more money in total. This is the 75 and the 75 are investigative positions for the Office of Consumer Affairs. And the IT support goes across both agencies, customer service and consumer affairs.
Okay. Hold just 1 second.
I'm sorry, I may have misspoke. These numbers, the pluses and minuses, indicate what we were requested to do as an agency for a 2% increase and a 2% reduction, should that come into play. I'm sorry for confusing the issue.
Okay, thank you. Well, I don't see any more questions. I appreciate you coming today. I'm actually, we've spoken several times, out of, not in committee and in committee over the last several years about this, and I appreciate the job that you're doing. And it looks like everything is definitely going in the right direction with your mission. I personally still have reservations myself, not in what you're doing. Like I said, I think you're doing a great job with your mission. I still have reservations about whether all that function and all that, and that's a lot of power. When people call in from all over the state with questions and it goes into one centralized call center, to me that's also a centralization of power. Every call that I get to my district when they need help, and I have several over the weekend that I'm going to try to help people with, those are people, in all honesty, very frankly, those are people, if I can help them, I'm probably going to be people that will help me in the future. If I don't get those calls, they come to the governor's office, the governor helps them, then, those are maybe people that will be friends of the governor, which I have no problem with that, but I don't want to lose my friends. And that's where that's the only issue I have with this. It's a centralization. Any centralization of power, and this is power. Knowledge is power. Sharing of knowledge and information is power, and that's the only reservation I have. As far as what you're doing with your mission to do it, I think you're doing a great job, and I commend you for that.
If I might make a comment, because I think that's an extraordinarily good observation. What we are doing is we're not trying to be case management people. We are trying to get a citizen to the person who can help them. We are not trying to take responsibility for what DFACS or Medicaid does or what you would do. People would call in and say, I don't know who my representative is. We want to get them to the right representative. We are not trying to solve the issues or be the fix-it person for folks for any of the agencies. But in the past, people would call and they would get bounced around from DNR to DHR to Homeland Security, and they'd never get to the right place. So it's a very important distinction. Some agencies, however, have said to us, like Driver Services, if they call in and want to know where we're located, we will give them the location and hours of operation, but we're not telling them the rules around how to get a driver's license. It's a very important distinction.
Thank you very much. I do appreciate what you're doing. Thanks for coming here today.
Thanks.
Further attached agencies. Is there anybody here from Homeland Security? Okay. And did you have anything else you wanted? I think you do have another. Didn't you have something else in there? No?
No, sir, we just have the common changes and our 2%.
Okay. Any questions from members of the subcommittee for the Department of Homeland Security? I know during a lot of times, it's brought up that maybe there's questions we need to ask them. I can't think of what any of the questions were right now, but nobody has any questions? Okay, thank you. IG, Inspector General. Do we have anybody here from that department, that sub-agency?
Yes, sir. I'm Betty Joyner. I serve as the budget person for the IG's office. Inspector General Liz Archer could not be here today.
Would you come up, please?
Yes, sir.
Okay, if you would tell us who you are and tell us your name. I know you're with the Inspector General's office.
Yes, sir. My name is Betty Joyner. I'm actually the executive assistant / budget person by default for our office because we have 5 staff people, and that's it. We have 3 investigators, the Inspector General, and myself. So by default, I'm here.
Okay, well, I just want to make sure I gave you an opportunity to come up and give any members of the subcommittee an opportunity to ask questions if you have any. Frankly, we've wondered, I think, from time to time exactly what the Inspector General's office is doing. Can you give us any kind of information on what's happening there? Or,
well, as you are aware, we cannot investigate anything with the legislative or the General Assembly. Ours is with the executive branch of state government only. So that is, 86 agencies? And it is to investigate allegations of fraud, waste, abuse, or corruption within the executive branch. We take anonymous complaints, and, by any means that may come in. We do investigations. We post them on our website. We have a website. We also have a toll-free number. And
okay, how many people actually work in that agency?
5.
5 people. Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, we appreciate. I don't see any. We do have one question here, Chairman Williams.
Does the Office of the Inspector General, do they handle whistleblower complaints? Is that where if somebody?
Yes, sir. We can handle that if it's in regards to an executive branch agency.
But not outside that?
No, sir.
Okay. There's a reduction of 16,670 on it. Would that be the loss of a personnel, or?
No, sir, it's not. The governor had a request for us to do a 2% reduction, which we did, and we actually did not need any enhancements in our office this year, so we did not ask for any. The only thing that we've asked for is the pay annualizers that are across the board. So we found out that we could do this, and we did it.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm not sure who's at 28. Chairman O'Neill.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just curious what the status is of the power of your office to subpoena records and documents and things that you might need in investigation. My recollection is you did not have that power initially.
We still don't, sir. We are not statutory at this point. We were created by executive order and do not have subpoena power. However, maybe one day down the road we will get it.
How do you, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, to follow up, how do you investigate if you can't demand production of documents? I mean, I don't.
Well, we ask
do people just voluntarily give you whatever they want you to see?
Well, we ask for documents, and because it's state agencies and because it's, open records and that sort of thing, we have not had any trouble with people giving us documents at this point, because I don't think that there's a state agency within the executive branch that wants to be the one that when our report comes out says, we ask for these documents and this state agency would not produce them or let us have them, in all fairness to open state government. So we, so far it's been good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's all the questions I see. We appreciate you coming up. Thank you very much. Okay, I know that we're running behind on the schedule. Because there are so many agencies this subcommittee reviews, most of these agencies we won't have another hearing before we start working on the 09, our version of the 09 budget, or I should say to create the 09 budget. And I just want to make sure that we have, thoroughly listened very carefully and thoroughly to the presentations from the agencies, and I've given everybody a chance to ask questions if they have any. I know we're running behind. Probably at some point some of these agencies will go more quickly and we may catch up, but I'm not, unless there's an objection from the subcommittee, I plan to keep on spending as much time as we need to. The next stage, is there anybody else here from the governor's office that need to make a presentation? Next agency is DOAS. Larry. If you would tell us, we know you, but if you would identify yourself and tell us what page of the tracking document you're speaking from, we would appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I'm Brad Douglas, Commissioner of DOAS. The pages of the tracking sheet that I'll be speaking from begin on page 9 of 43.
Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, if I may summarize the budget for DOAS. Overall, this represents about a 4.1% reduction in the overall budget, which is a mix of both state and other funds. If you understand the way that DOAS is funded, the vast majority of the funds within DOAS are composed of other funds, i.e. risk management, where we're billing agencies internally for the various trust funds, as one example. The change in state funds, there's actually an increase in state funds, the vast majority of which, $1.7 million, is associated with a transfer from SAO regarding the technical support for the fleet management system, and that's a dollar-for-dollar transfer of $1,705,000. The remaining increase, the balance of that $1.9 million,
above the 1.7 is roughly $200,000, for the most part associated with pay raises and then the transfer of 3 positions internally from division to division, and those show up in the administration division. And Mr. Chairman, again, we'd like to bring to the committee's attention the fact that the $1.2 million shortfall that we experienced in 2008 also is a factor for us in 2009. Does not show up in the governor's recommendation. We would respectfully request the legislature consider restoring the $1.2 million cut to the administration division of DOAS. At the top of the tracking sheet on page 9 in the common changes, the vast majority of the overall decrease, the 4.1% overall that I spoke of, is related to the risk management division. There is some $7.5 million overall associated with risk management. Some of this is in direct regards to recent claims activity where we have seen claims occurrences come down due to increased loss control efforts. In some cases, we have negotiated lower premiums for reinsurance. The loss control savings, for the most part, composes about $4.1 million, and another $2.9 million for lower premiums associated with reinsurance. And there's another $900,000 associated with 4 of our programs based on projected cost efficiencies within all those programs collectively. In the fleet management group, section 12.3 of the tracking document, there where you'll see detailed the $1.7 million that's coming over from the state accounting office on a dollar-for-dollar basis to fund the fleet management system, the technical support of that. And you'll also see a savings in other funds of nearly $1.2 million associated with the outsource of the Capitol Hill motor pool and the establishment of a statewide rental fleet. In mail and courier, again, funded for the most part internally, there's a $63,723 savings where we've eliminated 1 management position. This stemmed from our outsourcing some parts of, upgrading some of the services and then changing some of the operations that we have in place. And then the outsourcing that I was referring to is in section 12.8, dealing with the U.S. Postal Office, Post Office, where we have outsourced and consolidated both the Postal Service and the document services provider, and in doing so have saved $96,925, $21,000 of additional dollars in state funds.
Thank you. We have questions from members of the subcommittee. We do have questions. I see number 23.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much. Looks like we are getting a lot of savings here, but if we could clarify back on page 9 under the fleet management.
Yes, sir.
The 1.7, you said that's coming from the state accounting office?
Yes, sir. Originally, the staff who is helping support the fleet management system was placed in the state accounting office, and originally there was a broader attempt to bring other types of assets under that system, and so it made sense to have it housed under the state accounting office. We had a lot of convergence of different technical projects coming down the pike, specifically on behalf of the state accounting office and their support. And so right now, the fleet management system is a standalone application for the particular software that the state implemented. So we felt it would be best to bring that group dedicated to supporting this particular piece of software over to DOAS. And again, that's a dollar-for-dollar transfer.
Okay, so prior to that, we had that going on in the state accounting office and an additional 9 positions that were under the enterprise contract. So net between the two, we're still saving that $1 million off of that because of the enterprise cancellation of the enterprise.
Yes, sir, and all of the state vehicles that were in place as a part of the state fleet use for rental, those were sold or either redistributed to other agencies versus buying new vehicles.
Excellent. You've done a wonderful job under that. Under the mail and courier, and we applaud the reduction of the $63,000, will that impact the services at all?
It will not impact the services. In fact, the mail and courier service is one of the recipients of the governor's recent awards for customer service, one of 14 entities within the state that was awarded the governor's commendation for customer service. And so that group is a very committed group, managed very, very well, and obviously that's sort of the lifeblood of Capitol Hill, if you will, and we certainly understand that. So no, sir, no impact in service.
Okay, and then on the next question, or next page, and I'm sorry to keep going, but it's bringing to light some questions we've had throughout the year. On page 10, on 1213.2, we're eliminating 5 positions for the technology task force. Will we be looking at that being picked up under the GTA or anywhere else? Is this going to be a transfer of positions, or?
Sir, if I may, this particular section, 12.13, pertains to pass-throughs that come through DOES with specific regards to GTA. I'm not sure if there's anyone here from GTA that might be able to speak.
We have them on the agenda.
We'll be doing that on the, okay,
Yes.
we'll pick those up
Yes.
later then. I thank you very much for that. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Chairman Mills has a question.
Thank you, Commissioner. Glad you're feeling better. I think last time you were a little under the weather.
I was. Thank you, sir.
Glad you're better. I had a question on, and I may have missed this in your introductory comments. I apologize if I did. 12.0.7, the reduction of $4 million on anticipated savings there.
Yes.
What is that again?
We have, that is the culmination of 3 years of claims analysis. We pretty much on a rolling three-year average, we're constantly analyzing the claims and trying to determine where claims are most prevalent by type, by either agency or university, and then applying loss control efforts to those claims to try to mitigate or eliminate those claims altogether. One example of that, if I may, is we analyzed state drivers and the claims that were being received in the auto division of risk management. What we were finding is that there were an inordinate amount of state drivers who were hitting fixed or inanimate objects. Layman terms, that means backing out of a parking lot, hitting another car, hitting a pole, what have you. We put together a loss control effort initially focused around a training video that was sent out, and now some 30,000 state drivers have seen that training video, and as a result we've seen a significant reduction in those types of claims of hitting a fixed and inanimate object. Those types of efforts will continue. We have recently brought on a gentleman who was previously with the City of Houston as a loss control and safety officer to head up this effort and to have a statewide effort working directly with the agencies and universities, pointing out ways that they're operating to try to mitigate claims that are occurring throughout the state, whether it be fire, whether it be water damage, auto, what have you, workers' comp in particular, with safety programs.
May I follow up, Mr. Chairman?
Absolutely.
So I want to make sure I understand this. So last year you had $4 million in claims, but over the course of this year you were able to reduce that by $4 million. Is that?
Yes, we're trending downward, and so what we do is we take that 3-year average and we try to apply what we're seeing in that 3-year average coupled with any programs that we believe are affecting that trend, and thus put those programs in place. In many cases, these are claims that haven't occurred or that we don't need to go and increase premiums back to the rest of the state, the other agencies in the state, based on the claims history that we've seen over the previous 3-year period.
So this was not necessarily savings directly related to DOAS, is that right? Or is it to the other departments that you're administering?
This will ultimately be reflected in premiums, lower premiums, or not charging premiums in certain years across the various lines according to the mix back to the various agencies and universities in the state.
Okay, let me tell you what I'm trying to think it through in my mind. The Senate, and we won't get into that, but the budgetary process last year, we shortchanged DOAS a little bit, is what I understand you telling us from your earlier presentation and then reaffirming to us again today. And I guess what I'm thinking is if we shortchanged you $1 million and if you saved $4 million in just this one area, then why wouldn't that have just been moved over to that and absorbed that?
It's a great question. If the shortfall, the cut that you're referring to, the $1.2 million that I referenced, if that had occurred in the risk management division within that program, certainly that's exactly what we would have done. What actually occurred, however, is that the $1.2 million cut occurred in the administrative division, which is a different budget program area. And so that's the reason why we weren't able to cross over the program areas.
Which only leads me to say, well, then is there where these cuts are, is that reflected in the budget proposal, or is it sort of a redirect? I mean, these are great cuts. I applaud you for that. I'm trying to follow it through the budgetary process here.
With specific regards to the $1.2 million?
No, let's just stay in that $4 million question.
Mm-hmm.
The savings of $4 million on anticipated savings due to helping people to look before they back up.
Absolutely. Again, those are claims that have come down overall that we believe will continue due to the loss control efforts, and so those are lower claims that will be paid out. As a result, what will happen is eventually the premiums that are charged to the agencies will follow as that trend continues. And so, but it's associated. The reason that it's associated with other funds is because the way that risk management is funded, that entity is funded through charging the premiums to the various state agencies and universities.
So I guess what I'm looking for, I see the savings broken out $4 million. I'm looking for the savings in the total number.
The overall savings for the entire budget is $6.4 million. There's an $8.4 million reduction in other funds, a $1.9 million increase in state funds. The $1.9 million increase in state funds, the vast majority of that is associated with the $1.7 million that's coming over from SAO for the fleet management system. That's the one-for-one transfer that I spoke of earlier.
I guess.
I'm sorry, I must be missing the crux of the question.
No, I'm not asking the question good, apparently. Are the rest of the committee members, do you see it in this document, or am I blind?
Well, I mean, you'd have to add and subtract everything up. I mean,
Well, no, you wouldn't have to add.
Total.
I'm just trying to look for a total. Where's the reduction reflected in the total amount that's proposed?
Do you want to address that specifically?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
perhaps what we're seeing are just the changes to the meat of the matter, the big document, and we're not able to compare everything because this is not the full budget. These are just the changes.
Well,
Maybe that's what
it would be reflected in it's reflected in the total for the agency here, is it not?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, Joe Kim from DOAS may be able to shed some additional light on it for us.
If I could address Chairman Mills's question on the $4 million savings from people not backing into other vehicles or posts or whatever. In our risk management division, the liability program is its own separate trust fund. The workers' comp program is its own separate trust fund. The state property program is its own separate trust fund. Each of those are accounted for separately, and so I think what you're getting is the $4 million in savings. It inures to the benefit of the liability trust fund because that's where those claims would be paid out of. It does not do anything to benefit DOAS administrative division, which does the billing and the accounts payable for the rest of DOAS. What happened on the $1.2 million cut last year was there was a move afoot to use less outside attorneys for the workers' comp program.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt right now. I appreciate that. I mean, I appreciate you explaining, but that's been explained to us before. I mean, I don't mean to cut you off. It's just that has, but that really is not what his question is. I mean, you're answering part of his question in that they're two different programs, so therefore the money couldn't be, you couldn't show you're saving that much, but then just transfer it over to the other. I mean, it's part of the answer. And but I think what he's wanting to know is in this $4 million that you're projecting. I mean, we do this. We don't do this so much in the agencies. We have Chairman Mills in health and the health-related agencies. The subcommittees do that a lot. They show projections and what they believe can be saved because of some kind of improvement in a program or something, and that's what they've done here. They show that they're projecting to save that much. But if I'm not mistaken, Chairman Mills is asking then where is in your part of the budget here? Where is that shown in the total of your budget request? Is that reflected? That $4 million is that reflected in the in our budget analyst says yes, it is.
Yes, it is.
I think it is on page, Chairman Hill and I were discussing this, on page 10, there's a total of about $9.1 million, I believe, and that is subtracted from the top total funds of $165.9 as it began. I kind of answered the question myself.
Okay. All right. That's a good question.
Reduced it to 156,
okay,
which is what I was getting at, and I apologize for not making that clear.
That's fine. But I have seen that. I know, and I can see where both of you are coming from. We don't see that so much in the agencies that we review where there's a savings based on projection of something, a process being done better or whatever. But I do see it a lot in DHR and Department of Community Health where there's some process that's going to save, so therefore you can project, some X billions of dollars of savings, and I think that's what, not that I would try to answer your question, but has your question been answered now?
It has. I
Okay.
had one last question.
Okay.
And it was dealing with 12.13.3 on page 10, eliminating the grant funding for the wireless broadband. And was that the grants that was put out to local communities, like if they wanted to go wireless? Are you familiar? And maybe that grant money wasn't used, and so this is coming back?
Chairman Mills, we've got GTA. I think that's who we need to probably address that to.
Yes, that's a pass-through to GTA, so Patrick Moore will be able to address that.
And that is a great question. I appreciate it. We do have some more. The longer you're up there, the more questions pop up. So it's not your.
That's all right.
And I don't know who was next. I apologize. I think Chairman Williams was next.
Couple of questions, and maybe I'm not up to speed on some of this stuff, but where we've got reductions in ads and state funds, and then we go to total funds, and there's a difference in that, either reduction or is that the total funds? If it's not state funds, is that internal funds that's being?
Yes, sir, it is. Again, the way that the vast majority of DOES is funded is through the internal funds or other funds. In other words, with the mail and courier services, there are fees charged to the agencies for the mail and courier services around Capitol Hill. Risk management, the reserve funds as well as the premiums then that are charged the agencies and universities would then compose those internal funds. And so it's quite a mix. The vast majority of the funding is internal funds.
Okay. Another question on page 10. What's happened? I noticed we've deleted the one-time charge on the purchase and the annuity. Has that been done away with? Are we not?
If that money, my understanding is that there could possibly be a correction in the 08 amended budget, then that would fill that need, and so there would not be a charge for 09.
That's in our version of the budget. If it holds up through the Senate, it will.
And we thank you for that, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman Williams, you have further questions?
That's it.
Okay, I'm not sure who was next. I'm going to go over here to number 27. Is that Chairman Smith, Chairman O'Neill? You don't have to ask a question. But, okay. How about 23, Chairman Hill?
Hate to continue this, but it kind of untangles things. If I understood you properly, and I may not have, on earlier when we were talking with Chairman Mills on the reduction on 12.0.7, on page 9, that I thought I'd heard that you said this would reflect itself in a reduction of premiums in other departments and agencies. Was that correct?
It could as we go on, if this trend continues. And Charles, did you want to speak to that in particular?
Okay, because my real question, if I may, go ahead, Charles, because you'll probably want to be able to answer this. But
Charles Petty is our Director of Fiscal Services.
in the long run, what I'm trying to get at with our question as we do this, sometimes we have a hard time getting the 20,000, 50,000 foot view of, okay, if it's reducing it over here, where is it actually going? So that's what I'm looking for in the long run, is where we can look for in other agencies, whether it's this year or the amended budget next year or whatever, it's where we might look forward to say, okay, they're going to receive a cost savings in this, so we can look at their budget to see if it will be reflected. And that's the gist of my question, if you would, sir.
Well, I can answer you in generalities. Currently, we calculate the premiums that we bill to the other entities in the state of Georgia based on 5 years of actual experience. In other words, if they have an improvement in claims adjustments for this year, that'll be year one. And then as we go forward, we take 5 years at each time, and we allocate that and bill them based on experience, and then we bill them based on exposure. So you'll see over a 5-year period, those agencies that are actively addressing loss control or loss prevention, they should see a reduction in their related rates, whether it's workers' comp or liability or things of that nature.
Okay, and will we be getting some sort of breakdown on that? So as we look at these other departments, we can ask them or look and see if it's specifically within their budgets?
Yes, and as this unfolds, currently what I can do is there are some numbers here that I have that I can give you detail on under separate cover, and we can get that over to you this afternoon or tomorrow. Bear with me just a second.
Okay. Sometimes it's difficult for us to navigate our way through this rather rat's nest of what goes where.
For instance, overall, the number of incurred claims on an absolute basis are down 17.8% in the first 2 quarters of 2008 compared to the first 2 quarters in 2007. And the dollar amount of incurred losses are down 32.5% over the same 6-month period year over year. And so we can certainly give a breakdown of those, and because clearly that breakdown is what we're using to identify who are the ones who really need the attention, if you will, and then trying to put the prescription, if you will, in place to mitigate or eliminate those claims.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much, and thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I can see why you were feeling poorly before. It's a lot of work.
Oh, thank you, sir. One
Yes, sir,
additional
Charles?
comment, if we can.
Maybe it's okay, Mr.
When
Chairman.
we actually did the budget preparation for the risk management premium rates this year, we actually gave OPB we gave them the 2009 rates. So if your rate last year was $100,000, and based on your experience this year, it's $75,000, you saw an adjustment in that agency's budget in the rates for $25,000. The converse is also true, too. If you've had poor experience and your rate was $100,000 last year and it's $125,000 this year, then you saw a $25,000 increase.
It's just sometimes we don't see that, and that's my concern. We don't see where that is, and if it's a result of the insurance company's rates going up or if it's a result of the performance within the agency, and that's what we'd like to look at. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
And if I may just have one additional comment to Chairman Hill's last statement, the fact of the matter is we've actually been able to negotiate for some lower insurance rates, and that's also a part of the savings that you're seeing. So it's a win-win from that perspective.
Thank you very much. I don't see any further questions. We appreciate you coming today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Georgia Building Authority. I know we have somebody here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Kevin Clark. I guess until last week I was the interim state property officer, and Mr. Stansel couldn't be here today, so I'm filling in instead. He had a death in the family.
Tell us what page you're on. 26?
Yes, sir. We're on page 26 and 39.
Okay, you may begin any time.
Thank you, sir. I think it might be easier if you could refer to the handout that we're giving out. It should explain, certainly for me in simplistic terms, what we're asking for this session. And I'll wait till everybody gets that. If you'll look at the PowerPoint presentation, the blue presentation, the second slide after the intro page, really a recapitulation of how we arrive at our square footage amounts. Last year you would have seen the 3,121,764 square feet in rentable square footage. We go through for FY09 and we reduce those buildings that will not be rentable. Of course, DOT is scheduled to be taken down at some point. Murphy Avenue we can't rent. Archives is scheduled to go down. And so our subtotal of square footage that will come out of that is 387,973. So based off of last year, we have a revised rentable square footage of 2,733,791. Now, this year we instituted the FaciliCAD database process to arrive at our square footage amounts. That's the program that the Building Owners and Operators, Building Owners and Managers Association uses. And by instituting that methodology to determine square footage, we actually showed an increase of 74,981 square feet. So long and short of it is this year for FY09 we have 2,808,772 square feet. This will become relevant on the next page. So what we've done is we've looked at our square footage amounts. As you can see, the first line, our current office rates are $12.59 for standard office, $14.68 for premium office space. Then we show a reduction because we have gone up in our square footage by implementing FaciliCAD by 74,000 square feet or closer to 75,000. We then make a reduction in the overall rental rate so that our base rate for this year stayed flat. Does that make any sense at all? Okay, good. I'm succeeding. Well, okay, good. Much better. Well, basically, we tried to keep the rates at the $12 and $14 to keep them at that rate. So, for the revenue would be flat. So we had increased square footage. Our revenue stays flat. We reduce the rates. We're asking for our salary adjustments, our annualization of health insurance, workers' comp, our rate adjustments there. That would be a 52 cents per square foot rate increase for both premium and standard. And then we would like to restore the maintenance and repair fund at a 38 cents per square foot for standard and 44 cents per square foot for the premium. And that gives us a FY rental rate request for $12.90 for standard space and $14.96 for premium office space. So our next line is kind of the next page is the summary. Of course, we'll be asking for our 2 million, our occupied square footage will be, we estimate at 2,488,377. We break that down between premium and standard. We show our 52 cents per square foot increase for our salary adjustments and workers' comp and health insurance, and then our maintenance fund, and that brings our total for the overall request for $33,291,000. And the next page is just a pie chart showing for FY07 how our rental rates broke down. More informational than anything else, what we allocated those funds for. And then the last page is our capital outlay, which was page 39, I think, of the tracking sheet. On our capital outlay, we have requested money to demolish the design the DOT building site with another parking deck. and that goes to the whole Greenway Vista Capital Greenway project for $2,460,000. We're requesting $5,405,000 for additional water conservation and energy conservation implementations around Capitol Hill. The green space design, which involves #1 parking deck across the street along Memorial Drive and several other places. The design for that work is $8,400,000. And then the turning the World of Coca-Cola site into a state history museum, we're asking for $15,640,000. And that's our presentation, sir.
Thank you. We have questions from the subcommittee. Representative Houston, is that you?
On page 3, where do you have this broken down between your salary, health insurance, workman's comp, and adjusted rate increase? I mean, how much was for workman's comp? Is it broken?
If you go on page 4, on that slide 4, we will show the FY08 salary is $433,449, the health insurance $654,308, and then the workers' comp is $206,199.
Okay, what is this rate adjustment request, 5 point, where is that?
That's, if you go back the slide, if you do the numbers, that's that $1,293,000. When we do it, put it per a square footage basis, it turns out to be a 52 cents per square foot adjustment.
Further questions, Secretary Houston?
No, I'm just to explain to me, and I don't really understand it. Why would your square foot adjustment have anything to do with your insurance, your health premium, insurance premium?
Well, our revenues are derived off of rental rates, and so everything is reflected in those rental rates. That's how we do it. So if we have to cover those costs, we increase our rental rates accordingly to make up for that. That's how we fund those changes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any further questions? Okay, Chairman Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, sir. Last year, we heard some reports where some of our state agencies were not necessarily prompt in paying of their rental to the Georgia Building Authority. Has that improved?
Dramatically. Yes, ma'am. It has improved dramatically.
Okay.
It's worked out very well, and we appreciate all the assistance of everyone involved with that. It's worked out very well.
And then at the opposite end of that, we've had some state agencies who were reporting to us that they did not know the projected rental rate for the next year. I think those were agencies that had to calculate their costs separate from what you do, not necessarily attached to you. Has that communication improved at all?
I believe so. I've not heard any complaints in that regard, so I can only presume so.
Well, we tend to get that information when they ask for more money in the budget presentation. So that's why I was asking that. Thank you, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Any further questions? Members of the subcommittee, as you noticed and went through, there are some requests in here that related to these expansions and the museum that you may want to look into as we go through this process. And there are things that are kind of not out of the ordinary. I don't want to say that. There's some things that normally you don't have any big requests. I guess
there's some pricey items in there from a capital outlay standpoint.
Items in there. So there are ones that we need to look at, and it would appear that all of them are items that are needed, and everything has to be evaluated on the need and priorities and when they're needed. But one of them is the State History Museum, and it's something that it would seem to me we're probably way behind on. We should have done a long time ago. It's just whether or not we can go ahead and move on. But I hope that everybody will take a good look at this, because it is something that you probably get questions from some of your constituents about. and it's something that, you know, they bring down so many kids and everything every year. We want to have something first. It'd be good. It'd be great to have something first class for the children and people of the state to come and see the exhibits. I'm sure there must be a lot of things that are in archives. Obviously, yes. Everything over in the Capitol is not the extent of the things we have to exhibit. But thank you very much for coming. We appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Next is GTA.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Patrick Moore. I'm the Executive Director of the Georgia Technology Authority. Our budget and the changes in it can be seen on page 10 of the tracking document. We'll go over any of those in detail. As you can see immediately, we are reducing our budget. You can see the initial reductions there are an elimination of 5 positions and funding for the implementation for the Commission on New Georgia Information Technology Task Force recommendations, and also the elimination in grant funding for the Wireless Communities Georgia program. The remainder of the cuts are related directly to the declining revenues that we've seen at GTA as agencies have moved away from the services we provide. And you can see those there in the tracking document. Those are directly related to our decreasing revenues and our approach to management to just reduce our own costs as those revenues move away. By way of context, we're reducing our budget from last year, which was roughly $159.7 million, reducing it this year to $152.3 million. And again, that's in a response to the declining revenue base we're seeing and the management that we've needed to do to accommodate that declining revenue. We can get into as much detail as you like on the specific cuts. But we also have a major transformation going on at the Georgia Technology Authority, a consolidation of infrastructure and an outsourcing of that infrastructure. That project is also underway, and we're happy to discuss that as well. But I'll stand ready for any other questions. I know the committee's pressed on time. We're happy to get into as much detail as you wish.
Okay, thank you. We're behind schedule. We're not really pressed on time, I guess, because if we have to, we could extend these to another day. But we appreciate you coming. Do we have any questions from the subcommittee? I know that Chairman Mills was interested. He'd asked a couple of times about this $1 million cut where it says eliminate grant funding for wireless broadband. I thought there was actually more money in it than $1 million. So if it was eliminated, wouldn't that? It would seem it would be more of a higher cut than that. But if you could just tell us about that. On page 10. The
yes,
12.13.3 eliminate grant funding for wireless broadband.
That was the amount that was in the budget last year was $1 million. In the previous year, there was a $4 million appropriation for Wireless Communities Georgia. So that amount is based on the amount that was in the budget for last year.
Okay, but now I know that y'all had awarded the money for at least one of these, haven't you?
Yes, sir. We've awarded the funding for the first round, which was 2 years ago, and then the second round has also been awarded. And then this is the 09 budget. So the second round came out of the 08 budget.
So you've awarded all you're going to award. This is money that you don't need in there because you're not going to award anymore.
Well, that's exactly right. Okay. I mean, it's decisions made not to move forward with it. We have enough out there right now that we're able to learn some lessons and see what's next for the state's involvement in helping communities find wireless.
I know you and I have had a conversation about this. How many of those communities that have received funding actually have a wireless system up and going, one of these that we've funded money for?
Well, a number of them do. For instance, Decatur was one that was along the way in developing their own wireless system. So part of the criteria that the selection committee has used in giving the grants out is a community's ability to actually use the money. So how far along are they in their ability to use the funds and actually develop a wireless program? So you can look in the first round, for instance. Decatur's a very specific example. Thomasville's a very specific example. Milledgeville was a community that was awarded funds. Augusta was a community that was awarded funds, and Dublin was a community that was awarded funds. And in each of those cases, there was some level of ability to implement that existed within the communities.
Okay, I know that you weren't there. How long have you been at the agency now?
Well, just in February, so this year it's been officially a year. So I started in September of '06 as interim.
All right. Well, I know you weren't there when those the funding began for those wireless communities. And I won't ask you, but I was just wondering if you would consider it. I was going to ask you if you thought it had been a success, but I'm not going to ask you that.
Well, I mean, I can answer the question. I think first of all, we're still gathering data. I think in the case of Decatur, it's been an overwhelming success. Because it was a clear area where there was a partnership. We had a community that was along the way. They didn't know where they were going to get that bridge grant to build that next step. They now have a program. Constituents are using it. People have better access. So it's actually worked very well there. And then part of what is built into these grants and to the agreements are very clear deliverables and clear measurables. So we're going back to the communities and asking how the money's been spent, making sure there's some accountability. That's part of one of the reasons it's working is there is skin in the game from the community perspective. But certainly in the case of Decatur, which is probably the furthest along, we're seeing some real strides forward being taken there.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate you coming today.
Absolutely.
Oh, okay. We're going to be here for a while. What time are you going to leave? Okay. Next on the agenda is natural resources, and I know that the commissioner has an appointment with the governor, I think, right about this minute. Would you mind if we went ahead with driver services and maybe he would be back? I mean, would you have a problem with that?
No, that would be good.
Okay. Let's go ahead and go with driver services and see what happens with this.
I think Michelle's wiping her brow off there, so Mr. Chairman, I think you did her a favor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
I believe we're on page, I have a fax copy, so I'm assuming it hadn't changed, but I believe it's 38 of 115. Is that correct? 14?
14 on tracking document.
Okay, I must have a different, hopefully not a different version, but a different page on mine. On our budget request, you'll notice as we go through here, and I'll try to pick it out, but you'll see that very proud of the request that's before you, because I think it involves both innovation, customer service, and workforce planning. So as we go through here, I hope to express how this budget's going to move driver services forward and really build on the foundation that we've provided over the last few years as being a premier customer service agency. If you look at common changes in there, it's the common changes that most agencies have. It's the salary adjustment annualizer, workers' comp premium rate, and also the health benefit plan premium. And going into customer service support, the first item is the 2.5% increase that most agencies have. The first item that is unique to our budget is item 19.1.2, which is to increase other funds to reflect projected expenditures in 2009. This is the attempt that the budget cycle has gone through the last few years of trying to reflect all funds in the base budget. These are not new funds. These are funds that are typically amended in throughout the year and is mainly related to motor vehicle rate reimbursements that we receive from GTA. GTA uses the data from driver services to provide a limited and full MVR. GTA then reimburses us for our costs related to providing that data. And most will have another item down in license issuance that's related to that. So this is just the effort to get all the funds in the base budget. It's not new funds. Item 19.1.3 is a small portion of our workforce planning effort. We have done a phenomenal job trying to change our recruitment and also our orientation process to where we really model ourselves after some private sector entities such as Walt Disney and others that really, when you bring in an employee, you train them in the culture that you expect out of them before you place them into the work environment. This is a small portion of it, and we'll talk more about it in license issuance, but the $32,000 is related more to our recruitment efforts, specifically where we're going out to technical schools and regents and setting up and trying to recruit full-time positions for our agency. Item 19.1.4 is also related to a bigger item down in license issuance. It's the support function that's related to as we move forward in a new driver's license system, which our current system is over 16 years old, and we have an RFP out on the street. These are some support functions that will help us maintain the current service level under our new system, and I'll talk more about it in just a second. The first item under license issuance is one that we are very excited about because it does show where we're headed as an agency. It's 42 positions related to moving toward a more secure identification card and driver's license system and ensuring that we have our same customer service levels we have today. If you look at the budget recommendation from last year by the General Assembly, which we really appreciate the support, the agency's moving towards scanning in documents when you come in so that we have a scanned copy of your birth certificate, your proof of residency, many things of that nature. We're also moving toward a new RFP, and when that new driver's license systems come out, we'll be providing a temporary license at the counter, and then through the backstage processing, we'll be reviewing those scanned-in documents and doing a pure audit before the actual license itself is mailed out to our customers. These 42 positions is to help us move into that new system once it's activated. It'll be 24 positions in the centers. These 24 positions will go toward a current 78 vacant windows that we have in our 64 centers, then 18 validation positions that will be audit positions that will be reviewing the documents after our customers leave the centers and they're moved and the documents are forwarded to headquarters, which they'll review it prior to issuing the permanent driver's license. Item 19.2.3 is just the pay raise, the salary increase of the 2.5%. 19.2.4 is once again that MVR data that I mentioned earlier. Once again, not new funds, just recognizing funds that's amended in through the process. The next item, 0.5, is the same thing with our motorcycle safety program. That program is self-sustaining. What happens is as our customers come in, take the class, pay the fee, those monies come in and we amend it in through the amendment process, which House Budget obviously takes a look at, and it sustains itself. The goal here is to actually recognize those revenues from day one versus recognizing them as they come in. Item 19.2.6 is the larger portion of our workforce planning efforts here. We have about 95% of our driver's examiner ones that have less than 4 years of experience, and of our managers, over 53% will be retiring within the next 5 years. We have a high turnover rate in that area, and our goal here is to add to the orientation process, the leadership training that we've been doing, and build an actual training room at headquarters where you can actually not have to do on-the-job training, meaning today when we hire you, we send you out in the field, you're typing into the actual mainframe with real license records as you're learning. We would create, the majority of this money is to create a setting at headquarters that is not real-time, real data to where we can train our examiners, get them prepared before they go into the field. And it also creates a FTO program, a field training officer program, and that would be an add-on of 10% per trainer. I think it's 2 per region. Did I get that right, Michelle? Thank you. 2 per region that would actually, once they leave headquarters out of the training, then they would be assisted by an FTO until they're proficient at their job. That would help us with a multitude of things, specifically in consistency and also in customer service. Item 19.2.7 is an item that I'm very excited about. It's a web reservation system and a system as far as our testing goes. To talk about the testing to begin with, it's the programming cost to develop 2 systems. When you come in and take our driver's test for your 15-year-old driver or your commercial driver or someone getting an endorsement, they do sit down and take that test electronically. Georgia went to that several years ago. However, that system is not connected to the license issuance system. So we have some operator error that happens. We have shopping, meaning the rules say that you can come in and take the test today. If you fail it, you can show up the next day and take the test. If you fail it, you have to wait a week. If you fail it, you have to wait 30 days. Since the system is not integrated, you can come in every day and take the test without realizing it, or you could skip from center to center to take the test. Also, what could happen is, and sometimes we have had fraud where someone fails the test, but an examiner types in an incorrect score into the system. This integration would tie it all together to where that would not be an operator error, nor would it be a option for people to skip around and take the test. The other item, which is very exciting, is a web reservation. Today, in order to do a reservation for a driving test or a commercial driving test, you must call our contact center, our call center. We obviously operate business hours today. We're actually about to expand that to a little longer hours, but today we operate 8 to 5. And obviously a lot of people want to do reservations after hours. There's no way to do that. The other thing is there's no way for us to contact that individual. This web reservation system will be similar to if you're going to Ticketmaster, selecting tickets where it shows you best seats on in the arena for tickets, things of that nature. If you want to sign up for a driving test, you can see the closest to you, the nearest available. Creates almost a customer file where we can contact the customer if something were to happen. We had an ice day. We've had that where people still show up even though our operations are down. It gives us a way to reach out to our customers. And the other thing is we have the busiest contact center in the state, call center. We service almost 1.5 million to 1.6 million people a year. Over 30% of our calls are related to reservations. So this system, as far as meeting the goal of what Joe Doyle was talking about earlier, as far as contact centers, ours is one of the higher right now. We do it with less people than other contact centers. We have a goal of 85% of our calls being answered within 3 minutes or less. We believe that this will pay huge dividends when you look at the minor amount of money compared to actually trying to staff up to get to that 1 minute level that OCS is pushing for. And 30% of our calls are somewhere around 400,000 calls when you look at that. So don't believe it'll get rid of all of them, but we believe it's a great customer service facet. 19.2.8 is related to an Office of Customer Service initiative. We are currently on a Mitel contact center system. What that system does is it's not as far-reaching as the new ACD system that OCS has brought about for state government. Today we answer the calls. We can obviously listen in on our contact center to do quality assurance, but it's not like it is in most contact centers. We cannot look back in the history and see who the customer was. We can't see what action was taken or what the call was about. For example, I'll get calls in my office that says, I called the contact center and they just hung up on me. Hate to hear that. We go back and try to test it, but there's no way for me to tell who my contact center rep talked to, nor is it to see what the follow-up answer to the question was. This new system does cost additional monies. We've offset the current cost to the cost we're requesting, but it's $284,000. But it gives us a litany of things to actually manage our contact center and provide greater service. 19.2.9 is related to the RFP I mentioned earlier. As we go into our new licensing issuance system, today we have a pretty simple system. If you look at it when you come in, you walk in, get a ticket, go up to the center, we type up your information, you sit down, then we issue your license. Once we go to the temp license and then the permanent license, there'll be quite a bit of programming that has to be done to the system. This creates 2 additional interfaces that we do not have today with the mainframe, and those programming costs would be a little over $1 million. 19.2.10 is some assistance that we were given last session, and it's just a one-time cost related to an additional 13 positions in the contact center that the General Assembly approved last year, and it's reducing that one-time cost. The same with point 11. We had $750,000 granted to us to construct a new center down in Brunswick, and that money is not needed since the center is on its way to being established. The last 2 reductions are related to a feasibility study, which was one-time money, and also to our electronic document imaging system that was one-time money to get us up and going. And then there's one last item related to regulatory compliance, which is just the 2.5% increase for salaries. Mr. Chairman, that's our budget as recommended, and we would be glad to answer any questions.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the presentation, very detailed, and I appreciate you giving that. We do have a question. It looks like it's Chairman Smith, I believe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your presentation. The questions I have here were for Representative Chairman Mills, and he's not here now.
Okay.
So I was asked to ask him in his behalf. And you've answered these, but in just different categories. So I'll re-ask them if you don't mind.
Sure. I might say, now the tracking document you're using, I think, is at least one line off different than what we have.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. We were able to, stay with it, but I don't know what how yours, but it is one line off.
Well, I'll check and make sure next time I come I have the most up to date, and I
Well,
appreciate you guys
no, that's- I just wanna make
struggling
sure
through with me there.
If we ask a question about a particular line, it may be one line off from what
Okay.
you're doing yours.
Here, Kathy's giving me a different one, so hopefully I'll have the right one here.
All right, is the current driver's license system procurement on schedule?
Yes, ma'am, it is. The vendors have submitted their bids. We hope to that currently the vendors that have submitted have provided cards to us, and they're in a testing phase at the current time to see if they pass testing. Once they pass testing, we'll be doing our evaluation, and then DOS will be reviewing the bid, and we hope to be sometime between the April and August time frame to announce a vendor.
Thank you. Now, will the new cards cost more? What's the likely amount for the cost of the new cards to the state?
That's a difficult question, very, very good one. Obviously, we won't know until we open up the pricing package. I would guess that it would cost more just on the fact that we have not updated our card for over 16 years, and that we are integrating new processes, which means it'll be a one-stop shop at each window. So today, instead of having to go to a window, sit down, go to another window, sit down, and then go up and pay and take your picture, it would be a one-stop shop. Once you've been called to our examiner's table, they would have the equipment to take the picture, produce the license, and take the money and serve you at one time. So I would expect it to go up. My understanding is that Virginia has just made an award of a new license, and their cost was somewhere around the mid to high $2 range. They wouldn't give us an exact cost because they're in the latter stage of it. Today we pay $1.17.5 per license, to give you an idea of the comparison. And what that would mean is, just to give you an example, today our budget is right at $3 million for the license. It would go up substantially based on that. It could be double or more depending on what those prices come in, since you're looking at doubling the $1.17.5 compared to that potential $3 range. But like I said, we won't know until we go through the RFP process.
My own question to that, and do you also add other costs to that amount, or is that?
That is only the license production cost. If you look at our total operation, we do have a total cost figure, and I apologize, I'm blank, but I'll definitely provide it to the committee.
So that goes to the cost of the card that the one applying for the license would pay, correct?
Right. If you look at what we charge 20 and 35, 20 for a 5-year license and 35 for a 10-year license. Our revenues that are brought in, which go back to the general fund, we do not retain, is almost identical to what our budget is. We bring in about $62 to $63 million, and that's what our agency budget is.
So it would, in a future date, it would help us to see that, I think, for the committee to see that. And then finally, what amounts in the 09 budget are there for the new driver's license system? So that's what you've been referring to, but there's just different categories. So if there's a way to summarize that.
Yes, ma'am. Very, very well. We would be obviously with a successful bid on this RFP be back before this committee for the actual production cost of the card next year at this time. However, in this budget, when you're talking about preparing for the change in business, going from a one-stop shop to a temp license to a permanent license, we obviously have the $1.4 million that's related to the 42 positions that's in here, and also the $1 million for programming costs that's on 19.2.10. So you're looking at about $2.4 million related to changing our system and keeping up with customer service.
So 19.2.10 and 19.2.1?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Have I left anything off, Kathy? Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Chairman Smith. I wanted to ask, is there any, I don't recall you going over this, mentioned when you went through, is there any, did the governor recommend any funding from the funds that have come in from the fines for the teenage driving, Joshua's Law? Is there any, has he made any recommendations in here for that?
Yes, sir, and thank you for bringing that up. There's not an additional recommendation. It's just the base amount that's been in it the last 2 years, which is the $2.7 million.
Okay.
And as you recall from my amended presentation, let me get the exact figures. I brought them with me this time. Last time I was having to tell you an approximation. As you're aware, the code section says it's the intent of the General Assembly to appropriate the prior year collections. So based on prior year collections for fiscal year 07, $9.5 million was collected. So based on that, 2.7 compared to the 9.5 million in collections. And just to reiterate to the board how those funding, to the committee how that funding works, the funds are collected as a 5% add-on to traffic citations. The money is then transferred from the courts to the Superior Court Clerks Association. That's who tracks the money, and then the money is remitted to the Treasury, so it does not come to the agency.
Okay, so the 2.7 million, and that the funding mechanism for that actually expires in the end of June. Is that correct, as it stands right now?
Yes, sir. Based on the current legislation as it is, the sunset would go into effect June of this year, which means there would be one more year of allocation, which is the current fiscal year that you're currently looking at, based on the current law.
Well, do you see any, is there a need to have that extended out? I mean, you're the one, your agency is actually handling that and implementing that. Do you see a need to extend that out?
That's a good question, one that's difficult to answer in that it's only difficult that there's going to be a need for money for driver's educations from now until in perpetuity.
Right.
I guess the question is how much does the General Assembly and the Governor want to recommend for that purpose? The Commission has done a great job building a foundation so that we can truly study in Georgia. And in fact, I was proud today. I didn't know what the study was saying. I heard on 750 driving in that there was a recent study released related to all aspects of highway safety, teen driving as well as everything related to highway safety, but teen driving was mentioned in it. And it was a group called Advocates for Highway and Auto Safety. And I was very proud. I didn't know what the results were going to be, but Georgia was one of 17 states that ranked green. So Georgia was doing good according to that advocate group. Coming back to your question, when we reviewed the grant process, we, out of the $5.7 million, if you look at the 2 years combined that the commissions had, we opened up grants that Highway Safety administered for local public school systems to apply to either enhance or start up new programs. Through those grants, we had over 9.6 million, 9.7 million requests come in on that one grant cycle. We awarded over 4 million to those grants and expanded the slots in our public school systems by over 17,500 slots. The other thing that's really important when you look at the future of driver's ed is how do you study to see what's effective? And the one thing that we have established is a web initiative to where when someone's enrolled in driver's ed now, it's tracked through a web initiative so we can see what kind. So I think we're prone to do some studies and prone to move driver's education forward.
Okay, thank you. Chairman Smith has a question.
Yes, I apologize. This is a question asked me by some constituents in my district, and their children are homeschooled. And one of the setbacks they faced unexpectedly was that they could not produce an attendance record when they qualified for their first phase of their license. So is that a rules and regs? I know at one point we might have done that through legislation. I'm curious, is that going on now, or what's how do you adjust for a homeschooled child?
I hate that that's come to you because there's actually a pretty good answer to that one. All the homeschool children in the state still have to register with their local school system that they're being taught homeschool-wise.
Okay.
The local school system does provide that certificate of attendance for homeschool folks for issuing of the license. So if you have anybody who's having that problem, if you would let us know, we'll be happy to walk them through or talk to their school system if their school system is not providing that documentation for them. But there is a mechanism for them to get a certificate of attendance from their school system when they're homeschooled.
That's great to know. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. All right. Well, I appreciate you coming up and answering these questions, giving such a extensive explanation of what's in your budget request. At some point, and it gets more and more difficult as the session goes through to have hearings on anything. At some point, I may want to, if we can find the time, have you come, if you're available, and just talk about this teen driving aspect of what you do, because there's a lot to it. with this, with the sunset coming up, and what needs to be done, maybe something we need to talk about a little bit more. To members of the subcommittee, of course, this agency is new to us this year. It had been under the judicial or law enforcement part of appropriations before. But there's a lot of different organizations who have a lot of expertise in teen driving. A lot of people have different ideas about how it needs to be done. A lot of people have different ideas how much funding it would take. Some people, there are some studies, which I would disagree with, but there's some studies that say that teen driving doesn't even help the statistics of teen accidents and teen deaths. I have a hard time with that, but I didn't do the study, but there's a lot of different aspects to it. We have here with us today Pat Wilder. Pat, did you want to make a presentation? Okay. Thank you for coming. We have Bob Wilson here, and of course, they've done a lot of study into this issue, and they've asked to speak to us. We are behind, and I know you've been sitting here a long time waiting, but we are behind on our schedule. But if you can give us a presentation of what your perspective on teen driving and where it's at and what you think we should do, I would appreciate it.
Be happy to. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Appropriations Subcommittee. My comments will be very brief today, and this is a public comment related to the DDS budget that Greg has just presented. My name is Bob Wilson. I'm the director of the National Safety Council Georgia chapter, located here in Atlanta, Georgia. We as an organization for almost 100 years have been in the business of saving lives and reducing injuries throughout our country in all aspects, but certainly driving is one of our primary areas, and specifically the teen driving area. Two quick purposes today for my comments. The first is to encourage a higher percentage of funds to be allocated to our Georgia high schools for driver education through the fines already generated through Joshua's Law. So we definitely encourage a higher percentage of funds that has just been talked about. Second, a few years ago, the General Assembly required all teens under the age of 17 that wanted full licensure to complete a driver's education course certified by the Georgia Department of Driver Services. The policy provided funding for increased accessibility to driver's education, particularly in the areas that are underserved. And we appreciate your recognition of the importance of improving the understanding of these driver's laws in Georgia, especially as it relates to our new teen drivers. The question of effectiveness of driver's education persists, based largely on a study conducted back in the 1980s with our DeKalb County school system. But at last year's Transportation Research Board meeting, experts stated that new technologies and understanding of learning behaviors can create driver's education curriculums that can make a difference. I believe we are faced with a public policy concern, accountability for public dollars spent on driver's education. The Georgia Driver's Education Commission is working to maximize the value of past allocations through Train the Trainer programs, online driver's education, and funding classrooms throughout the state. For all that we are currently spending, there is no evaluation process to determine if our investment is saving lives and decreasing injury for teen drivers, their passengers, and related crash victims. So we're asking the General Assembly to increase the Joshua Law allocation of existing funds to an independent or national joint research study through DDS or possibly the Governor's Office of Highway Safety that will accurately evaluate the effective methods for training our teens on how to drive safely. Utilizing existing classrooms that are currently funded each year through Joshua's Law, that alone covers the majority of the cost of this research. Over the past 6 months, we've had the opportunity to speak to public and private entities throughout the state, and there's interest in additional funding resources to assist in this research program. And we believe that the effectiveness of the training can be properly evaluated here in Georgia. The National Safety Council may or may not participate directly in these research efforts, but we feel we can provide additional expertise to begin the process of developing driver training programs that can be proven to save teen lives in Georgia and the nation. Knowing what works will provide valuable information and resources for private and public driver education providers. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any questions from members of the subcommittee? Thank you very much. I appreciate you having had to wait for a while there. Okay, well, that concludes driver services. Commissioner Holcomb is not here, is he? I mean, he may not be back. Just one second. We could do that. Okay. What we will do now is we will take up EPD, the EPD portion of Natural Resources. I think Director Couch is here.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. On page 24 of your materials under section 32.3 are items related to the governor's recommendation on the Environmental Protection Division budget. I'd like to highlight several of the items, and I would be pleased to answer any specific questions at the chairman's discretion. On item 32.3.3 is an amount of $516,000 that is a redirect, a transfer of funds from EPD to the administration program to make that program whole in relation to the costs that are normally associated on an annual basis with legal fees that are related to expenses in the in defending the appeals and administration of legal challenges to permits and other matters that are issued by the Environmental Protection Division. Item 32.3.4 is a amount of funds that the governor is recommending to be passed through the EPD budget to help assist the funding for the Metropolitan North Georgia Water Planning District. As you might know, the district, since its inception in 2002, has received in all but 1 year a certain amount of dollars to assist in the state portion that is also used against locally assessed funds to complete the budget every year. This year, the Metropolitan North Water Planning District is moving into the phase of doing a assessment and an update of their plan, and their levels of activity this year have increased somewhat. The next item I'd like to discuss with you is 32.3.5. The Environmental Protection Division has worked over the course of many years now to finish a scientific study called the Coastal Sound Science Initiative that began about 7 years ago. That initiative was to understand the degree to which the coastal areas were being reliant regionally on the very important Floridan aquifer. The costs of that activity through time have included certainly the scientific studies, analysis, modeling, and all of the information that went into deriving a permitting plan for the coastal region to include 26 counties, but most notably resulted in the lifting of the moratorium for many of those counties. Part of the work that is ongoing that is no longer supported under some of the funds that were previously available are important funds associated with continuing to understand that as we use the aquifer, as we monitor the success of our permitting strategy, we have funds that continue to support the measuring of groundwater levels and surface water flows to assess whether or not our use of the aquifer and related surface waters are being done in a way that helps protect certainly our water quantity and quality, and to assure that we are doing our part to measure and continue to prevent saltwater intrusion along Georgia's coast, as well as areas that are regional to the use of groundwater around Savannah. In previous years, the funds that were derived from the Coastal Sound Science Study that provided resources were a share done by, of course, State of Georgia appropriations, but also, very importantly and notably, funds that were derived from a consortium of paper companies that helped defray part of the costs. And part of the costs that they helped defray, which now have ended with the conclusion of the Coastal Sound Science phase and the permitting strategy, is areas that had been activities that had been conducted for the monitoring that needs to be ongoing. This monitoring is important. It helps us continue to determine whether the permitting we're conducting is working, and it helps us to determine and provide the long-term record of the effects both on the aquifer and surface water that will be necessary as the coastal region continues to grow, and information that will help us assure that we're guiding a water supply activities for coastal Georgia that is commensurate with environmental protection and the stability of those water resources. Item 32.3.6, the Department of Natural Resource, as many of you know, operates a state-owned building in Brunswick on the marsh. If you're going over the bridge to Jekyll, you'll see it off to the left-hand side. Hopefully many of you have had an opportunity to visit that building. The Department has undergone a series of evaluations with the assistance of the Georgia Building Authority to determine how best to deal with certain problems that have arisen through time. The building is one that requires maintenance. There's leakage, carpet, paint, and a variety of other aspects of the building that need to be enhanced to provide it to be acceptable space for office. At the same time, the department has literally shoehorned the staff that are in the building. It was determined that the least and best cost option for dealing with these issues was to, rather than the initial plan of expanding a state-owned building in that site and the cost of building to hurricane standards right there on the marsh, the least cost option to the state would be to take the Environmental Protection Division staff that are currently in that building and to move them to another site that would be built to suit and then leased by the department, EPD. The lease amount for the leased build-to-suit building is in the amount of $300,000. This is roughly a 13,000-foot building that would house 28 staff members, as well as the EPD motor pool and the staff that services large areas of the coastal region. Those are the most significant items that I wanted to have the opportunity to give you some specific information on, and I'd be happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you. Do we have questions? Chairman Smith.
Presentation. And in your sound science study in the coastal area, just add emphasis to what you're saying. This data also helps us with our talks with South Carolina as we're looking into saltwater intrusion. Is that correct?
Well, the continuing monitoring is absolutely essential so that we can correctly and scientifically represent the facts of Georgia's use of these aquifers. And certainly this is an area of concern to South Carolina as it relates to their real or purported issues with our use of both surface and groundwater.
Thank you.
I've got a question regarding this $300,000 lease.
Yes,
now,
ma'am.
now, last year, this building you had, did you have to, all these other departments have to pay so much rent to the Department of DOS?
Mm-hmm.
Which is it?
GBA.
GBA. Did you have to pay them last year?
No, ma'am. The staff that would be housed in this facility are currently housed in a building operated by the department, and so.
So it's not operated by
no.
DOS?
No.
Thank you.
Okay. Chairman Royal has a question.
Dr. Couch, it doesn't affect the budget, but do you have any idea when you'll be making the decision on whether we will have a drought declaration in the lower Flint Basin?
As you know, by statute, I need to make that declaration by the 1st of March. I am in the process this week of completing a briefing. The governor will be briefed this week, and then depending on his input to me, he will determine at what point in time I'll be making that announcement.
Thank you.
Okay, I apologize. Chairman Roll, did you get your question answered?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any further questions? That's all the questions I see. Thank you very much. I'm going to go ahead and go to, do you mind going ahead and presenting for the DNR? No. Okay. Go ahead, and if you would
okay.
Tell us who you are. We know who you are, but if you would go ahead and make that announcement and proceed, we would appreciate it.
I'm Michelle Bonner, and I'm the Chief Financial Officer for the Department of Natural Resources. And I'm just going to hit the high points in DNR's budget, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
That'd be fine. If you have if you can tell us what page of the tracking document you're on.
Okay, I'm on page 23. I do have the correct one, don't I?
That is correct.
Okay. Under the common changes, I'm not really going to go over all of those. Those are the pay increases, that's standard across all departments, and the premium increases and that sort of thing.
I'm sorry. I'm told here by it's 21.
Oh, it's 21. I'm sorry. Woody sent me the wrong one.
It's Woody's fault. You're in trouble now.
Okay. Under common changes, item 32.0.9, that is adding additional $95,896 to the Wildlife Endowment Fund, and that is under the Wildlife Resources Program. And that's what the difference between what was in the base budget, which is $600,000, and what we actually collected in sales of lifetime license at the end of FY 2007. So that puts the proper amount of money in the fund based on the collections, which is what it says in the statute, and it also helps us with the Fish and Wildlife people who require us to do that, to be able to count those license sales each year on the federal funds we receive from them. Then item 32.0.10, that's operating funds for the Okefenokee Echo Lodge. That $200,000 of that is in the Parks program, and then $5,000 is in the administration program. That $5,000 is for the computer-related items that are needed to open that facility. And what we've done is we've built a lodge, an Okefenokee Lodge, and the lodge is complete, and we're finishing up, and they'll open in June of this year, 8 cabins that are on either side of the lodge. So this allows us to open that facility so that we can start having the public come and utilize it. Some of that we discussed last year. There's really nothing of note under administration. Basically all that's there is transferring funds that Dr. Couch spoke about from environmental protection and from wildlife resources to allocate where the actual money is spent on the legal fees. Last year in the appropriations bill, that cut was made in administration, but the actual expenses are in wildlife resources and environmental protection. So that just gets things matched up properly so the expenses and the revenue's in the right place. Under coastal resources, there's one-time funding that was put in last year was removed for the coastal dock renovation, which we're proceeding quite well with that, and we should have all those completed by the end of this fiscal year. And then also there was $180,000 in there to raise sunken vessels, and that was considered one-time money last year, and that's been removed. That's the $1,530,000 removal. And also in the department's budget, there was a total of 28 replacement motor vehicles appropriated. One of those motor vehicles was in coastal resources, which is item 32.2.4. 4 of the replacement vehicles are in parks, and 23 of the replacement vehicles are in wildlife resources. There's really nothing to discuss under historic preservation or land conservation. That's basically the pay raise allocation. Under parks, item 32.7.3, that is an increase in state funds of $665,966, and that allows the Lake Lanier Islands Development Authority to stop making the payment on the bonds that were paid off some time ago, and state funds are put in there to make DNR whole because that payment was made through DNR's budget, and they'll no longer have to make that payment starting in FY 2009. 32.7.4 is the 4 law enforcement vehicles that are replacement vehicles in parks. Item 32.7.5, that's removing one-time funds that were put in last year. There was $30,000 to do a master plan for Flat Creek State Park, which is in Houston County, and then also to put a fence up at the Troop Tomb site, which we've already done that fence. Then item number 32.7.7, we're increasing our camping fees, cottage fees, and lodge fees $2 or $3, and since the governor required us to do some cuts in our budget request, one of the cuts we suggested was cutting state funds and replacing them with this license increase. And typically every 2 years or so we look at all the rates for camping and cottages and lodges throughout the whole park system and have a system-wide rate increase, and that's basically what this is. Item number 32.7.8 is operating funds for the additional 9-hole golf course that's being added at Gordonia Altamaha State Park, and also we're building 3 cabins there, and we currently didn't have any cabins there, and those cabins should be ready to open this summer, and we're building those with Department of Corrections prison labor, and that provides funds so that we can open the additional 9 holes and also have a housekeeper and linens and that sort of thing to operate those cabins. Under wildlife resources, item 32.10.1, that's the 23 replacement law enforcement vehicles that are being allocated to wildlife resources. Item 32.10.3, that's the removal of one-time funds that were put in our budget in FY 2008. That included $5 million for the Go Fish program, and that has to do with the boat ramps that are being built around the state, and then some spraying for unwanted vegetation on Lake Blackshear, and that spraying will be done in the spring of this year. That was determined to be the best time to do the spraying to get the best results, enabling us to kill the noxious weeds there. And then there's $500,000 that's being removed, and that was for the replacement of the dam at Arrowhead, which we're currently have started working on that project, and it should be done before the end of this fiscal year. And then the stables at Dye Lane Plantation, the commissioner and I got a report on that last week, and we're almost complete with that project. And then the Wildlife Endowment Fund, there was $969,000 put in that fund last year because we had a federal audit, and they weren't pleased because we hadn't been appropriating the interest earned on the fund. So $600,000 stayed in the basin. I spoke earlier about that. We had put the right amount in to properly fund that based on lifetime license sales in FY 2007. And item 32.10.6 gives us the ability to hire 15 additional law enforcement positions throughout the state, and those will go to some counties that currently don't have a conservation ranger in those counties. And item 32.10.7 also provides some additional money so that we will be able to pay for the leases on wildlife management areas. And currently we have 184,000 acres leased throughout the state that, you know, we use for wildlife management areas. And typically the rental cost per acre goes up on some of those per year. And then item 32.10.8, that's to allow us to retrofit a helicopter that's at the coast that we use to fly out over the ocean to count whales and do other sort of studies, and this will make it safer for the pilots and whoever happens to be on that helicopter when they're doing that work to fly over the ocean in case there's a problem or anything. And that really is all the high points I was going to speak of, but if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you for your presentation. I see one question. Chairman Royal has a question.
Okay.
You mentioned that you were going to increase the rates on the camping and the cottages at the different state parks. Does that also apply to the privatized facilities?
No, this has nothing to do with the privatized facilities.
So only the state operated?
These are only the state operated, yes, sir.
Thank you.
Chairman Williams.
Couple of questions on 3274. Replace 4 law enforcement vehicles with mileage in excess of $250,000. That comes to $62,000 a vehicle. What type vehicles are these?
To replace, that's $60,000. It's $15,000 a vehicle. These are pickup trucks. We had originally asked for $250,000, and the governor recommended.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
We'd asked for considerably more than that in our original request.
Now, some of these items that you haven't requested, or you mention them, but you don't show any agency request, but yet they're over in the governor's recommendation. Are you depending on the governor's recommendation to get your funds for that, for these items you hadn't?
We're very pleased with the governor's recommendation.
Okay. What about?
Yeah, further questions, Chairman Williams?
That's it.
Any other questions from the subcommittee? I wanted to ask you, and I forgot to ask them to come to the subcommittee today. Are you, and you may or may not be, are you familiar with the request that that Representative Cole and Representative Knight have in relation to High Falls State Park?
Yes, sir. I was handed this right before we walked over here,
Okay.
so I think Commissioner Holcomb would be better to speak on that than me.
Well, I will just say, and I will provide members of the subcommittee the information. There's a request from Representative Cole and Representative Knight, and they've done this, I think, in conversation with the commissioner for a request of $148,000. It has to do with legal fees and beginning a process at High Falls State Park to, I think, research some deeds and things of that nature. But I'll provide you the information. I forgot to ask them to come, but I want to try to make sure that requests to this committee are presented to the subcommittee, or presented in subcommittee. But what that are you?
There's some questions about some of the title on some of the land around that park, and this is the amount that some staff in DNR had put together needed to be to try to clear that up.
I will provide members of the subcommittee a copy of this. Well, I see no further questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Beg pardon? Oh, and we do have someone here, one you're part of the budget on DNR that wanted to make a presentation, and I appreciate you coming. As I expressed earlier, we're way behind. So, and I don't want to cut you off. It's just at this point, probably the shorter your presentation,
I fully understand.
Listen, we would all listen.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate you giving me a few minutes, and thank you to the committee. My name's David Waller, and I'm with the Georgia Wildlife Federation. And we're here today because hunters and fishermen are upset, and we want to help you understand why. And first, you need a little history, and again, I'm going to be as brief as I can. But in 1987, there was a hunting and fishing license increase. It was like $2 for hunting and $2 for fishing, and it generated $4.5 million. And there were 32 $15 million bond sales that was used to purchase 60,000 acres of land that's in wildlife management areas and public fishing areas today. Same thing happened in 91. There was another hunting and fishing license increase in 91 that was roughly $2 for hunting and $2 for fishing. And land was purchased with it. Total, there was about 160,000 acres of land purchased with the last two hunting and fishing license increase. That 87 increase, the bonds sold in were paid off last year, $4.5 million. So in this little package I gave you, we asked the governor on August 15, 2006, what were the plans? We'd like for hunters and anglers to have, some say-so in how those funds would be used, since it was all basically hunters and fishermen's money that were used to fund those programs. This was before the election, August 15th. We didn't hear anything back, period, on any of this. So we went to see Ed Holcomb in the governor's office. I think it was during the spring, and we said, Ed, we got to help us out. What's the plans with these funds? It's $4.5 million still coming into the budget, to the general funds, and the land's been paid off. And basically he said, well, the governor's not into dedicated funding and earmarking funding, so, he's probably not going to commit to that. And we said, we understand, but we still want to talk with somebody about it. And he said, what you need to do is get the DNR board to come speak to the governor. He thinks highly of him. So if you look at that second letter, we got a group of conservation organizations, and we made a request to the DNR board. And so the board appointed two people ago, Bob Rutland and Bill Archer, and they went to talk with the governor about the hunting and fishing license increase revenue. And they came back and said to us that the governor's not interested in dedicated funds, same thing Ed had told us, but if you'll send him a list of what you think the needs are for wildlife conservation in Georgia, then he'll consider it. So we did that, and the governor's recommendation, there was some positions included in there, which was good. We feel really good about that. But we still have some concerns that there wasn't enough done for the sportsmen of Georgia, since that was the funds put in there. Well, since all this took place, we found out about 3 or 4 weeks ago that we're about to get a new hunting and fishing license increase. And it is in the form of a surcharge. The license system has been outsourced, and it's going to cost hunters and anglers, for the very minimum, $2.50 to go buy a hunting license or a fishing license per transaction. Information is in your package there. And again, we view that as a hunting and fishing license increase. And if you look on that back page, here's an example. If I walk in to buy a fishing license that costs me $9 today, if I go in this fall and buy it, it's going to cost $11.75. And so we're concerned about those two things, the hunting and fishing license increase, and the fact that the revenue generated from the 87 hunting and fishing license increase, we'd like to see some of that go back to the Wildlife Agency. We've got real concerns that the Wildlife Agency, the funding has been cut back considerably. The vehicles are literally falling apart. The governor did put in the recommendation this year, 23 vehicles, but also he included filling 22 vacancies. So if you fill those 22 vacancies, you have to get them vehicles. I mean, that's how they work. By the way, for you folks that don't know me, I worked for DNR for 32 years. I was a wildlife director my last 13 from 1990 to 2003, and I retired then. their vehicles are falling apart, and it's just not good business to try to run a vehicle. Half the vehicles have over 6 years, over 135,000 miles. These are vehicles that are driven in the woods and on wildlife management areas. These aren't road miles. These are tough miles. And they aren't just having to make minor repairs. They're having to replace engines and transmissions, and that's eating up the operating money, and therefore they can't plant food plots on wildlife management areas and dove fields and that kind of thing that sportsmen are used to seeing. So all the information is right there in front of you. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Well, thank you. We appreciate you coming and sharing that with us. So we have questions. Subcommittee. Good statement. Concerns, but no questions right now. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. We're moving along here. Mr. Hinton, I had forgotten that you had requested to change to today. Won't you come on up? I'd like for you. I know we have people been waiting, but I know you have an issue that you're trying to deal with outside of here.
Appreciate it. Good afternoon. Carol's passing out some information on our budget request for the 2009 fiscal year. Basically, our budget is one of continuance. We, in our submission to the governor's office back in September, we reflected a $1.1 million net increase over our 2008 budget, final budget. That consisted of increases for pay raises, annualized for the fiscal year, of $1.2 million, and then a reduction of approximately $100,000 in other budget categories throughout the agency. But once again, I'm coming here with my hat in my hand, in that our budget submission is presented in September of the fiscal year, and there are 3 adjusting items to that original budget request, which occurred or which were initiated in the governor's budget, which was finalized in the month of December. I'd like to get the good one out of the way first. The governor's budget contemplated a $43,000 reduction in our budget for workers' comp, and our request will net that amount against that. So we'll take that or include that cut in our adjustment submission. I heard the Georgia Building Authority speaking a bit earlier about the rental increases, and once again we attempted to work with GBA right up until the time we submitted our budget, but apparently there were some adjustments in the rental rates made during the preparation of the governor's budget in the month of September. And bottom line, our rental rates went up approximately $70,000. So we would request that amount be included in our budget in accordance with the way it's been treated in other agencies' budgets. The other adjustment item reflects a net adjustment for the health insurance increase, which the governor put in his budget document. In that document, and is evidenced in the budgets of the other agencies, that rate went from 22.843% of payroll to 24.182%. That, if we had projected that amount against our payroll, it would have been an increase of $292,000. Once again, that amount is offset, however, based on an estimate we made of what our pay raises would be. and the net of those two numbers will adjust our payroll increase back to the same payroll increase that was afforded the other agencies, and the adjustment for the health insurance. I apologize for having to come to the committee each year with these adjustments, but the system is, my budget is dealt with the same way that the General Assembly's is, and is included in the governor's budget document unadjusted. So if I could entertain any questions.
Well, we do have one, I believe. Chairman Smith has a question.
Again, my question goes to, how can there be better communications?
Well,
because what you know we have to do now is find this money elsewhere.
Yes, ma'am. It's really the timing of the statute. We're in the same boat as the General Assembly, in that the statute requires that our budget be submitted by September the 1st to the Governor's Office of Planning and Budget, to protect our independence and to recognize the legislature's the separation of powers. The Governor is required by statute to put our budget in his document unadjusted. So when the Governor finalizes his budget 3 months after we have had to submit ours, these policy decisions are made, and we're sort of behind the 8 ball with regard to that. Our only alternative, I think, would be to try and outguess the process, and perhaps if that may be what we need to do. But we worked very closely with the GBA right on up until the time we had to submit our budget, and we received their assurance that there wouldn't be any adjustment. But whenever they finalized their revenue projections and such in December, then as it turned out, there was.
There still has to be a way to make this work without us always having to go hunting money.
Yes, ma'am, I understand.
So, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Thank you.
We will be glad to work towards that solution.
I just want to make sure I've got, so your request, I know you got the $70,000 for rent. Now, is there another one?
Yes, sir. There's the net increase request for increase is $191,000, which consists of the $70,000 for the building rental,
okay,
a reduction of $44,000 for workers' compensation. Our workers' compensation dropped.
Okay.
Being auditors, we don't have a whole lot of injury cases.
Okay.
So and then the other adjustment is a net adjustment for our projected increase in the health insurance versus what we had attempted to put in our budget for our pay raises. So we netted them out to where we would be on the same level as the other state agencies.
So then, but the total is, we need to make your budget right based on your request, $191,000.
Yes, ma'am.
Right? Okay.
Yes, sir.
That's okay. Hey, I carried a cosmetology bill the other day through the
Yes, sir. That was a nice pink tie you had on, too.
So, I mean, I'm not surprised. I don't see any further questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, sir. And appreciate the committee's indulgence.
Sure. Okay. Actually, we're not as far behind as it seem like we could be, but I do appreciate appreciate everybody that's waiting. I appreciate those on the subcommittee that's sticking in here with us. I really do. Thank you very, very much. A couple of the agencies we have left probably won't take that much time, I don't think, but I want to go ahead and go with revenue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Graham was called to a meeting with the governor this afternoon as well. So I'm Chris Walker, Finance Director, and
okay,
I'll be standing in.
We'd like to see the commissioner one day, though.
Yes, sir.
We really would.
I know he'll be glad to follow up with you as need be regarding anything that may
Of course,
come
you
up.
did say you had a meeting with the governor, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
We're on page 27 of 40 in the tracking document. We basically got 3 items in this request, Mr. Chairman. 40.0.5 is the $3.28 million, and this is just the request to provide funding to meet the annual demand for motor vehicle license plates. I'm sorry, it's 40.0.5.
Okay. That's a change in the way that license plates be made, is that correct?
Part of that, yes, there is, and part of it's just the additional license plates needed to be provided.
Okay.
So, yes, sir. The second item, 40-3-1 on the same page, is the requested increase for the homeowner tax relief grant of $10.49 million.
Okay.
And as we talked about earlier, the department had requested Dr. Haganey to provide an analysis and projection in relation to these numbers for this request. So those are a result of that. And then finally, on page 28, it's item 40.10.4, 40.10.4 rather, and that's $1,210,000. And this is just for continuation of our data warehouse project, the 5-year installation of our data warehouse that you all were generous enough to approve and support us in last year. This is just the continuation of year 2 of that project, which is our corporate and withholding tax base.
Okay.
If there are any questions,
I don't see any. But before, I think somebody may have a question here. Before you do, there's been, there's been a bill dropped in the House, I think in the Senate also, relating to the issuance of the tax stamps on tobacco and a new way of doing them. And you're familiar with what I'm talking about.
I'm familiar that a bill has been dropped. I'm not familiar with all the details.
I'd just say those are the subcommittee to hear. I believe the bill may actually come through this subcommittee, so we will have probably an opportunity to look at that in a little more detail in a few days, I guess. But there are those people that say that the state could bring in a lot more revenue if there's a different way of doing the tax stamps on tobacco products, basically. Okay, Chairman Williams, I know you were first, I believe. No, Chairman Smith. Okay, Chairman Smith.
Chairman Williams.
Tell us a little bit about the new tags. Once this initial cost to implement the new system, will that be a kind of a one-time shot as far as the bulk of getting it
yes,
changed
sir.
over?
The initial cost embedded should be a one-time cost. Again, that's predicated. We're billed by correctional industries. They're actually the ones that produce these tags for us. So it's really predicated upon their billing and what type pricing we receive from them going down the road. But certainly the logic is that the initial pricing should.
Are these going to be the flat tags?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay, Chairman Smith, you did have a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your presentation and standing in for the commissioner. I continue to get calls from CPAs and tax preparers that they're still frustrated with the communication they're getting from our state level with questions and expediency on tax returns and that type of things. And I know last year your report was y'all are addressing that. How is that improving? Because I'll be getting them again, so I'd like to have an answer.
Well, just a very basic, and I know the commissioner can speak to this much better and in much more detail than I can.
And if you could refer that.
I absolutely will. In fact,
thank
I'll refer to him and let him give you a response on that if that's okay.
All right, thank you.
I guess it was 2 years ago we passed a bill to increase the fines on people who were not remitting their sales tax. There were some businesses that weren't charging sales tax, and we increased the fines from, it was like $100 in the county jail, and I think that was years ago, to $10,000 a fine and everything. What are y'all doing to work with local tax commissioners and local governments to make sure that all people are paying, remitting their sales tax? Is there any kind of ongoing dialogue to make sure these people are paying sales tax?
If it's okay, may I refer that one to the commissioner and let him provide you a response?
Okay, because I keep hearing from constituents that a lot of motels and at some convenience stores are not really remitting all of their sales tax, and I wondered what y'all were doing and how many investigators you have out working on this.
Okay, we'll certainly follow up with you
All right,
on that.
thank you.
That's all the questions I see. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, we have on the agenda State Accounting Office, and I see for some reason I had allotted you all a lot of time. I don't think it's going to take you that much time, so maybe this will be a workers' comp is the last, I believe, right? Okay.
Hopefully we'll be able to make up a little time for you. I'm Lynn Valinga, State Accounting Officer. We're page 8 on the tracking document, I believe. Page 8. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. As you can see, the majority of our requests are the common changes, the compensation package recommended from the governor. The only the item that where we do have an increase on 11.1.4 is internal validation and verification and validation. This is a process required by the Georgia Technology Authority when we have a significant size IT applications and implementation projects to have independent verification. And as you may remember, in the transition from our office and creation of our office, before we had those costs, they were actually covered by GTA. With the transition, we now have to cover those in our budget. So this is something for the continuation of rolling out the streamlined banking to our state agencies. The reductions are as a result of the governor's request to identify 2% reductions. We had some one-time cost in increasing our office space, reduction of that, and then some general operating costs that were reduced. And then, as was mentioned earlier by Commissioner Douglas from DOAS, we are transferring the operations of the fleet management system to Department of Administrative Services. I think that was explained well earlier this morning. We did have a request to receive continuation funding for 17 positions that were authorized last year. At the last minute, the Senate reduced that request with the explanation that we would not be able to hire those all the first year, wouldn't need the money for the whole year. We're anticipating having all those positions filled in 2009, and so had asked for that request, and that's one that didn't go through for the governor, but the governor told me it was okay to ask for that through the legislature. Have any questions? Happy to answer those.
Thank you for your presentation. We do have a question.
Streamlined banking?
The banking processes of the state are very costly to the state. We have, the Commission for New Georgia recommended that if we were to reduce the time it takes to get revenue collected into the Treasury, have it in Treasury longer, we would gain interest earnings somewhere between $3 and $5 million a year. And the process of doing that is a significant change to the way the state does business. And because right now, money's collected by departments, it's deposited in their bank accounts, sent to Treasury, appropriated, sent back to departments in multiple bank accounts. We have one accounting system, but we clear checks out of many bank accounts. We could clear checks out of one bank account, but it is a significant change in business operation, a very complicated process to change. And so we've rolled out a pilot agencies, and we're doing that in 6 agencies now, but we need to also roll that out to the other state agencies. Which
would you be doing banking with a bank that's major headquarters is in the state?
We went through a bid process to select the banks, an open bid process,
This doesn't close every account the state has with the bank, but the major operating accounts were gone through a bid process, and Wachovia and Bank of America were the ones that won the open bid process.
Where does Bank of America have their headquarters? So it's in Charlotte, North Carolina. Is that correct?
No, I can't answer that. What wasn't one of the criteria on the bid?
That was not one of the criteria for the bid that they were a Georgia bank.
One of the criteria was presence. They did have to have presence in Georgia, and the coverage throughout the state had to be. That was one of the criteria, is the best coverage in the state, and they have a significant presence in the state.
Okay, so that money is sent to North Carolina, and okay, thank you so much. You answered the question.
I can't tell you the flow of the money through the banks. We collect
Okay.
it. It gets to the treasury.
What companies in Georgia bid on the what banks in Georgia that domiciled here bid on the business?
I believe SunTrust bid, and I believe Regions.
Did Synovus and Columbus bid?
Excuse me, Synovus did.
Okay, I might have some more questions on that later on. Thank you.
Okay, I'll be happy to talk to you about that.
I see no further questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
And I think we have one agency that's still to come, and you know, we're not all that late. I do apologize for being, but we're about 20 minutes late, I think, right now.
It probably, Mr. Chairman, feels longer to you than that, right?
We saved the best for last. That's right.
Well, you know, I'm Carolyn Hall with the Workers' Comp Board, and I think we're on page 34. Is that right, Lisa?
Yeah, that's right.
Well, I just have a little handout. You can do with it what you wish. I know you get a lot of those. But for our budget for FY09, the main changes, of course, are the common changes, which start at 48.01, the salary, the reduction for workers' comp, and I think DOAS for workers' comp just bases what each state agency pays to them based upon payroll, not upon occupational titles. But ours went down a little bit. And then we have the health benefit plan adjustment. The other across-the-board adjustments, if you want to skip down, I think are in 48.1.4, the salary increase for 09, and 48.2.2. I just grouped those together because those all deal with the plugged-in increases based upon what will happen in what will happen in the July 1 to carry forth the changes in the salary that went into effect this January, and then the ones that will go into effect in January of 09. The main changes to our budget are in the administration part. You'll see 48.1.1, and what that is moving money within the administration program, the $345,000, and those amounts go into 48.1.2, which is an additional $13.9 for real estate rentals. And our bigger item and our ongoing item is 48.1.5 to move money within the program to provide for ongoing support and maintenance for our integrated claims management program. We entered into a contract, a $3.4 million contract in June, so it was the fiscal year 2004. That contract ends June 30 this year, 2008. The contract, the $3.4 million, included an annual support and maintenance from the contractor for code work on the code. So now we're going to need to account for that within our budget, and so that's what the $333,000 is for, and that's for a contractor to continue to provide support and maintenance of the system that we've built. We've gone from the state Go mainframe to Oracle database, and we have converted all of the workers' compensation claims files from paper to electronic. It's been a huge project. It's been a lot of challenge. It's very exciting. We've just gone live in January with web access. We're rolling out web access to the insurers and the attorneys. And we already have done it internally this past year because we have offices around the state, including in Columbus and Savannah and Dalton, and we've been using the kind of the Pony Express to send the files back and forth. Now everyone internally at the board has immediate shared access to the claim files. So we know that the ongoing support is going to be managed both by us. We've increased some of our internal staff. We've worked with GTA, but of course they're working on an RFP to outsource a lot of what they do, and we'll need to be managing a vendor, from now on to do the level 3 or detailed coding on our project. But I want to start off too. For some of you who are not as familiar, most of you are now. I remember since my beginnings meetings with y'all, that we are not. Although it's called state funds, we're not funded by tax revenues. We're funded by assessments on insurance carriers and self-insured employers. Whatever you set our budget, we assess that to them. We collect it, and we pay it into Treasury, and then draw down against our budget. We have had a lot of support from those companies. They've been kind of a driving force to help support this integrated electronic filing that we're doing, and essentially they are paying for it also. I don't know if you have any specific questions about workers' comp, but we put some handouts on the assessments. Several other states fund their workers' comp commissions and boards that way, and those that do, we are the lowest assessment. And our system produces the lowest cost per worker of the surrounding southeastern states to Georgia business. So,
thank you. Actually, we still have some energetic people here. I've got 2 questions.
All right.
Looks like Representative Houston.
You bet.
I apologize. I was looking at the figures when you said a word that just sort of
Well, workers' comp has a lot of buzzwords.
A buzzword, and it was outsourcing. And you said you were contracting to outsource coding.
Well, just the workers' comp board's not going to do it.
No.
In other words, we're not going to hire staff. We've worked a lot with the GTA. They helped us with the RFP because we had never done a project like this. But yeah, we're having that. So our contract ends, and we're going to need a contractor to continue to provide the some of the help with the work on the project. We've hired internally staff to provide what they call in contract terms, I understand now, level 2 support. So our project deals with FileNet and .NET, and so we are doing that internally. As far as support on call support, we're doing that internally. We're working, I heard some other agencies speak about the Governor's Office of Customer Service, the call center problem tracking that they have. So we're going to tie into the state contract that the Governor's Office of Customer Service has with Nortel and Oracle, and then they will train our staff to manage the call center and the help desk and the knowledge tracking that we'll need for the system.
All right, thanks.
Okay.
All right.
Outsourcing.
Well, just that we're going to need to contract. Our main what I was trying to say is our main $3.4 million contract included the vendor to provide the support maintenance. Since that contract's in, we're going to need to bring in that money, from another source. Okay, thank you.
Chairman Roger Williams has what might be the last question of the day.
All right. I'm honored to.
May not be, but
it's not a question. It's a comment and a compliment. It's refreshing to see someone come before us and ask for less than what the governor recommended, and I want to commend you on cutting your budget down.
No, we'd like everything the governor recommended.
Okay. But how many judges do we have now, workers' comp judges throughout the state? How many we got?
Throughout the state, I think it's 23 right now.
Okay.
And we have 8, or is it 9? We closed one field office, but I think we have 9 now.
Okay.
And we're, with the technology and with their access, we're trying to really emphasize them now as service centers for the people who live in their areas who may not have computer access, although most people do now, but we have the setup there in those offices, and it also has access to, all of the state's websites.
Okay. Thank you. Chairman Williams, I don't know if you saw that Judge Massey has a request in for a Cadillac Escalade for his personal.
That's right.
I don't.
I won't
But-
see it.
He tried to sneak that one in on us.
He didn't cut that out of the budget.
It may have to go.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, and as far as the recommendations, there are a couple of places where you'll notice it's not state funds, where they have plugged in some other funds, and that is not, again, not even funds that comes into our budget. It's that on occasion, on a regular basis, we do sell like copies of files to parties who want a copy, and so that kind of accounts for that money. But as we go totally electronic with web access, and I'm going to hush because y'all have been here too long, the users won't have to order copies, and we won't be able to charge for them in the future because part of the service is they'll have online access. They can download and print
That's
for
a very
free.
good point. It really is. Thank you very much. Thank you all for being patient. And
Thank y'all.
we must have taken care of it. The room's pretty well cleared out. Thank you. Thank you very much. And